When we speak of restlessness, we're not just talking about a tapping foot or an inability to sit still. Restlessness lies deeper than that. It hums beneath the surface of our day, today, often unnoticed but always present. It's the constant flicker of thoughts, the endless scrolling through information, the inability to find peace, even when the world around us is quiet. It's waking up tired after a full night's sleep. It's reaching for distractions the moment silence enters the room. We live in a time where restlessness is not just common, it's the norm. But what if, instead of escaping it, we turn toward it with gentle curiosity? There's something quietly powerful about sound. Not just any sound, but the kind that doesn't demand your attention, doesn't push or pull, just exists. That's where Zen echoes come in. They're not music in the conventional sense. They're not noise either. They're a meeting point, a place where silence and sound shake hands and sit quietly together. Imagine water gently lapping against a wooden pier, a bamboo chime catching the wind, the low vibration of a temple bell carried across a morning fog. These sounds don't rush you, they wait for you, they breathe with you. They invite you to slow down without telling you to stop. You may have noticed how some spaces immediately make you feel different. Step into a cathedral, a forest, or a secluded reading room, and your body knows, instinctively, how to respond. Shoulders drop, breathing slows, your mind gently lets go. That's not coincidence. It's environment. And the sounds we surround ourselves with are part of that environment, just as much as light or temperature or color. Zen echoes are crafted environments for the mind, acoustic spaces shaped to welcome the restless, the weary, and the wound up. Consider for a moment the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is automatic. It's the background noise of life. But listening, that's intentional. That's when the act of receiving sound becomes a kind of presence. Zen echoes ask for this kind of presence, but not with urgency. They don't shout, they don't even speak, they suggest, they offer. And in that offering, there's space. Space to breathe, to reflect, to just be. We've built lives full of motion. Even in stillness, our minds keep racing. Notifications, obligations, the endless loop of what's next. Zen echoes are not an answer to all of that. They don't promise to fix what's broken. What they do offer is a pause, a window, a small and sacred moment where restlessness can be witnessed without being fed, where the nervous system, so often overstimulated, can finally exhale. Not because everything is solved, but because, for once, nothing needs to be. If you've ever closed your eyes in the middle of a storm and focused only on the rain, you've touched the edge of this experience. If you've ever been in a crowd but found peace in a solitary melody, then you know what it's like to hear stillness through sound. That's the heart of Zen echoes. It's not about escape. It's about meeting yourself right where you are in the noise and finding that quiet still lives there too. So this is an invitation, not to turn away from your restlessness, but to listen to it, to give it a voice, and then to give it space. Because inside every echo, there's a silence. And inside every silence, there's something waiting, patiently, for you to return. To truly grasp the idea of Zen echoes, we need to explore the world they originate from. A world where simplicity is not emptiness, but clarity. Zen at its core isn't about escaping reality. It's about engaging with it in the most honest and direct way possible. The roots of Zen stretch back through centuries of Eastern philosophy, threading through the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, blooming fully in China as Chan, and later finding refined expression in Japan as Zen. But while Zen emerged within temples, among monks and scrolls in stillness, it was never meant to be confined to monasteries. It is a way of seeing, a way of being, and sound has always played a subtle, yet essential, part in that way. Zen doesn't demand devotion to complexity. In fact, it urges us to let go of what is unnecessary. In a Zen garden, every rock, every ripple of sand, every angle of a stone lantern has a purpose. Nothing is there by accident. In much the same way, the soundscapes we call Zen echoes are built from minimal, intentional elements. A single gong, the hush of wind through bamboo, the long decay of a plucked string. Each tone, each breath of silence that follows it holds weight. In Zen, silence is not a gap in the experience, it is the experience, and sound is not a distraction, it is a gateway. One of the earliest teachings in Zen comes not from words, but from a gesture. The Buddhas, seated before a silent assembly, raised a single flower. Most in the crowd were confused, but one disciple simply smiled. That moment is said to be the birth of Zen. No lecture, no scripture, just presence, just awareness. This is the kind of deep seeing, deep listening that Zen echoes gently encourage. Sound in Zen has always been more than music. In temples, wooden clappers mark the passing of time. Bells are rung not to signal an event, but to bring the mind back to the present. In meditation halls, the sound of a breath can be louder than the world outside. Zen echoes are shaped from these traditions, not copied, but inspired. They borrow the intentionality, the restraint, the patience. But they live here now, in our modern restlessness. Zen's central teaching points us toward direct experience, toward seeing things as they truly are, not as we imagine them to be. And what better tool for that than sound? When you listen closely, sound bypasses your thoughts. You don't analyze a chime or dissect a distant bird call. You receive it. You feel it. Zen echoes make use of this immediacy. They allow sound to draw you out of the storm of thinking and into the space of simply being. Consider the rhythm of a Japanese shakuhachi flute, its breathy, uneven tone, more whisper than melody, or the deep resonance of a rin bell, whose fading vibration seems to vanish into another world. These aren't performances, they are moments. They exist to be experienced fully, then released. And that is the essence of Zen presence without grasping, awareness without clinging. Zen echoes are built with this in mind. They aren't soundtracks, they aren't playlists. They are encounters crafted to be lived in, not just heard. As with a koan, one of those enigmatic Zen riddles meant to stop the thinking mind in its tracks. These sounds are not puzzles to solve, but experiences to enter. They bring you back to yourself, not the self of roles and plans and tasks, but the self that simply breathes, the one that's always been there. So, when you hear the soft rustle of paper or the steady drop of water echoing in a quiet room, you're not just hearing a sound. You're being invited. Invited to step out of the noise of your thoughts and into the stillness that holds them. Invited to remember that beneath the chaos, there is always a quieter rhythm waiting to be heard. A rhythm that doesn't rush. A rhythm that, like Zen itself, waits patiently for us to notice. The connection between sound and stillness might seem paradoxical at first. After all, we usually think of stillness as the absence of sound. But in the world of Zen, stillness isn't about silence alone. It's about spaciousness, about presence, about being fully in the moment. Sound, when approached with intention, can lead us directly into that space. It can quiet the mind not by removing noise, but by transforming how we experience it. Sound becomes a companion to stillness, not its opposite. Throughout history, cultures around the world have understood the impact of sound on the human spirit. Indigenous communities have long used drumming, chanting, and ambient tones to enter meditative states. Monastic traditions, whether in the East or the West, incorporate bells, chimes, and harmonic vocals to guide attention. There's something primal and deeply intuitive about the way our minds and bodies respond to sound. Not just to melodies or lyrics, but to the subtle resonance of tone, texture, and rhythm. Zen echoes are built on this ancient understanding, but shaped for the modern ear, the modern pace, the modern ache for peace. You've likely experienced it yourself without even realizing. Think of how your body reacts when rain begins to fall steadily against a window pane, or how a single long note from a cello can pull emotion from places you didn't know you were holding. That's not coincidence. That's resonance. Your nervous system, your breath, your emotional landscape, all of it responds to sound in ways that are both physical and deeply emotional. Zen Echoes aim to make space for that response, giving restlessness not something to fight, but something to harmonize with. And then there's the role of silence itself, because Zen Echoes are as much about the spaces between sounds as the sounds themselves. In our world, silence is often treated like a blank canvas, something to fill, to occupy. But in Zen, silence is the canvas. It is where everything begins and where everything returns. The pause after a bell is struck, the breath between two notes, the fading ripple of water after a drop. These are not empty moments. They are full, rich with potential, with meaning, with presence. They allow the listener to reflect, to rest, to reconnect. Zen Echoes don't follow a traditional musical structure. There is no verse, no chorus, no climax. They unfold like a landscape, a gentle, slow, changing view that you don't so much follow as inhabit. This lack of structure isn't accidental. It mirrors the fluid nature of our inner states. When the mind is restless, it often latches onto patterns, trying to predict what comes next. Zen Echoes soften that impulse. They invite the mind to let go of prediction and sink into observation. They say there is nowhere you need to go and nothing you need to do. Just listen and be. One of the most profound gifts of Zen Echoes is how they hold space without intrusion. They don't try to cheer you up, fix you, or inspire you. They meet you where you are, without judgment or agenda. That's rare in today's world. So much of what we hear, whether in music, media, or conversation, is full of direction, of intention. It wants something from you, but Zen Echoes want nothing. They're just there, steady, quiet, alive. And in that non-demanding presence, something inside us relaxes. Something remembers. It's not uncommon for people to find that, after listening to Zen Echoes for a while, they start noticing silence more acutely, or that the ordinary sounds of life, a refrigerator hum, a distant bird call, the rustling of leaves, suddenly seem more vibrant, more musical. That awareness is not a side effect, it's part of the process. Zen Echoes are not just sounds to hear, they are sounds that teach us how to listen. And as we listen, we begin to hear our own restlessness, not as a flaw to fix, but as a rhythm to tend to. So as you move forward, let yourself approach these soundscapes not as entertainment or even as therapy, but as a kind of dialogue, a gentle, ongoing conversation between your awareness and the world around you. Let the tones guide you not outward, but inward, to the quiet spaces within that have always been waiting. Let them remind you that even in your most restless moments, there is a part of you that is already still, already grounded, already home. To understand restlessness, we have to first look at what it feels like, not just on the surface, but deep within the body and mind. It's more than being bored, more than feeling busy. It's that constant hum just beneath the skin, that inability to fully relax, to feel truly present. It shows up in ways we sometimes fail to notice. A tendency to multitask, a discomfort with silence, a compulsive checking of devices, a need to be in motion even while sitting still. Restlessness is often mistaken for energy, but it's not energy. It's friction, a kind of subtle resistance to the present moment. At a physiological level, restlessness is tied to the nervous system. When we're in a heightened state, stressed, overworked, overstimulated, our bodies produce more cortisol, our heart rates increase, and our muscles stay tense. It becomes harder to focus. Our attention skips like a stone across the surface of our thoughts. This is not just a mental pattern, it's biological. Our systems are flooded with signals telling us to stay alert, stay moving, stay vigilant. And yet what we often need is quite the opposite. We need to slow down, to ground, to soften. But restlessness, by its nature, resists that very process. The modern world has shaped us in a way that reinforces this cycle. We're rarely away from screens, rarely disconnected. Our lives are lived in high resolution and high velocity, with very little room for slowness. Notifications ping throughout the day and into the night. News, messages, deadlines, distractions. They come at us in waves with no clear endpoint. We exist in a loop of engagement, constantly pulled toward the next thing. And even when we try to rest, the nervous system doesn't instantly quiet down. It's been conditioned to stay on high alert. That's why so many people struggle with sleep or feel exhausted despite not doing anything difficult. The body is tired, but the mind is still sprinting. Culturally, restlessness is often rewarded. Productivity is praised. Hustle is glorified. We wear business like a badge of honor. But underneath that drive is often a deeper discomfort, a fear of what we might feel if we actually stopped. If we allowed ourselves a moment without purpose or direction, what would rise to the surface? For many, that question is quietly terrifying, so we keep moving. We keep filling the space. But the thing about restlessness is that it grows stronger when we avoid it. The more we resist stillness, the more restless we become. Children offer us a window into a more natural rhythm. Watch a child at play, completely absorbed in the moment, unaware of the clock, shifting between movement and stillness with ease. They aren't worried about maximizing their time. They follow instinct, curiosity, rhythm. Somewhere along the way, we lose that. We become disconnected from the organic ebb and flow of our attention, our energy, our emotional needs. And when that natural rhythm is replaced with constant stimulation, restlessness takes root. But it's not a hopeless state. Restlessness is not a flaw, it's a signal. It's the mind and body trying to tell us something, that we need a different kind of nourishment, that something is out of alignment, that we're living too far from the ground of our own being. And in that way, restlessness can actually be a doorway, if we're willing to listen to it. Not run from it, not fight it, but meet it with care. We can learn from it, we can soften around it, we can even begin to calm it. This is where Zen Echoes find their place. They don't speak to the mind that wants to analyze or categorize. They speak to the nervous system, to the breath, to the part of us that existed before we had words. They bypass the rational and go straight to the somatic, to the physical experience of being here. And that's where healing begins. Not with understanding, but with sensing, with feeling. Even just a few minutes of immersive, intentional listening can shift the body out of a fight or flight state and into something more restful. It's not about perfection. It's not about achieving some ideal meditative stillness. It's about creating a space where the nervous system can remember how to let go, where the heart can beat just a little slower, where the breath can deepen without being forced. Over time, this kind of listening begins to reshape our relationship with restlessness. It doesn't eliminate it. It teaches us how to live alongside it, with more ease, more softness, more compassion. We start to notice the early signals, the racing thoughts, the shallow breath, the tight jaw, and instead of pushing through, we pause, we listen, and in listening, something begins to shift. So if you find yourself in that familiar space, your body present, your mind somewhere else, know that you are not alone. This is not a personal failure. It is a cultural condition, a biological response, a learned habit, and it can be unlearned, not all at once, and not with force, but with gentleness, with awareness, and sometimes with the quiet guidance of sound. To better understand the restless mind, we have to consider not just biology, but also the culture that surrounds us. Modern life moves quickly, sometimes faster than our minds or bodies were ever meant to. And while technology has given us many conveniences, it has also shaped our attention in new and challenging ways. We are always connected, always reachable, always reacting. This constant state of alertness leaves little room for true stillness. We scroll without thinking, we absorb without processing, and in all of this activity, our internal rhythm, the natural rise and fall of focus, of rest, of emotion, gets lost beneath the noise. We live in a time when attention is currency. Everything competes for it. Apps, ads, alerts. The design of our digital environment is often meant to hook us, to pull us in, to keep us coming back. There's a cost to this, not just in terms of time, but in the subtle erosion of our ability to sit with ourselves, to be alone with a thought, to be quiet without reaching for something to fill the space. It's no wonder that restlessness has become a nearly universal experience. Culturally, we've also come to associate value with speed. Efficiency is prized, productivity is celebrated. Rest can feel like an indulgence, or worse, a sign of laziness. Even our leisure time is often consumed with doing, planning, organizing, maximizing. We count steps, track sleep, schedule self-care. But these systems, while helpful in some ways, can also turn rest into another performance, another goal, another task. We forget how to simply be. We forget that being is enough. This loss of spaciousness has real effects, not just mentally, but emotionally and physically. When our culture teaches us that we must always be achieving, we begin to feel uneasy in moments that offer no obvious purpose. Waiting in line, sitting in traffic, walking without headphones. These ordinary experiences become uncomfortable. Silence becomes suspicious. Stillness intolerable. The mind, no longer used to being without input, starts to panic when it doesn't have something to grab onto. This is the root of cultural restlessness. It is not just a personal tendency. It is something we have been taught, conditioned to accept, even rewarded for. But the good news is that we can unlearn it, slowly, patiently. And one of the gentlest ways to begin is through sound. Specifically, sound that doesn't ask anything from us, that doesn't try to entertain or instruct, that simply exists. Zen Echoes offer this kind of listening experience. They provide a space that isn't built on productivity or performance. They're not music in the conventional sense. They're more like a landscape, an oral space where time stretches, thoughts slow, and the nervous system begins to recalibrate. Think of the way your body responds to nature, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of waves, the layered hum of insects on a summer night. These sounds don't follow a script. They don't push a narrative. They simply unfold. And in their unfolding, they offer us a mirror, a chance to match our internal rhythms to something more ancient, more grounded, more alive. Zen Echoes are created with this principle in mind. They weave together natural textures, tonal elements, and long, patient silences to support a kind of listening that is not focused or analytical, but open and receptive. There is a subtle intelligence in the way these soundscapes work. They don't tell the restless mind to be quiet. They give it something soft to rest on. They meet the mind where it is, tense, tired, overstimulated, and gently coax it into a new state. Not by forcing stillness, but by allowing space. By offering moments of resonance that feel safe, that feel familiar, that don't demand anything in return. And over time, this kind of listening can begin to change the way we interact with the world. We become more attuned to the pauses between moments, more aware of how sound shapes our emotional state, more sensitive to the environments we create for ourselves. We may even start to seek out silence, not as absence, but as presence, as something rich and nourishing, something whole. In many ways, the journey through restlessness is not about removing distractions, but about shifting our relationship with them. It's not about banishing noise, but about learning how to move through it with grace. And that starts with awareness, with noticing, with listening, not just to sound, but to what sound reveals within us. Zen Echoes give us a place to practice this, a place where nothing needs to be done, where no reaction is required, just a willingness to listen, to let the mind and body settle, to remember that we are more than our thoughts, more than our tasks, more than the digital noise that surrounds us. We are whole, we are here. And in this quiet attention, this deep listening, restlessness begins to soften, not because it is gone, but because we are no longer pushing it away. When we speak about Zen echoes as more than just an aesthetic experience, we're entering the realm of sound as therapy. Sound as subtle medicine for the nervous system, the emotions, even the body itself. This might sound abstract at first, but it's grounded in real, observable patterns, both in nature and in the way we, as human beings, respond to acoustic stimuli. Therapeutic sound doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. In fact, some of the most profound shifts happen through the quietest tones, the softest rhythms. These are the foundations of Zen echoes. Think for a moment about the way water behaves when you drop a pebble into it. A single point of contact sends ripples in every direction, gentle but far-reaching. Sound works much the same way inside us. A tone enters the ear and is translated into electrical signals by the brain. But it doesn't stop there. It affects the heart rate, the breath, the muscles. It even resonates through bone and skin. We don't just hear sound, we feel it. We are vibratory beings, constantly in dialogue with the world through frequency. Nature's own soundscapes are inherently therapeutic. The rustling of leaves, the babble of a brook, the distant call of birds. These are not random. They fall within frequency ranges, tend to calm the nervous system rather than agitate it. Research has shown that exposure to natural sounds reduces cortisol levels, lowers blood pressure, and improves focus. These findings are not just data points. They're reflections of something we've known intuitively for centuries. When we walk in the forest or sit near the ocean, we feel better. Not because we're escaping, but because we're aligning with a different, slower, more coherent rhythm. Zen echoes replicate this rhythm with care and purpose. They take cues from the natural world, not to mimic it exactly, but to translate its soothing patterns into a form that can be accessed anywhere, anytime. These soundscapes often include subtle textures that mirror those found in nature, low drones that resemble wind through trees, soft pulses that echo a distant drumbeat in the earth, sustained tones that fade like light dissolving at dusk. They are not composed in the traditional musical sense. They are composed to hold space, to create an emotional and physiological container in which the listener can relax, reset, and reconnect. The science behind this approach continues to grow. We now understand that certain frequencies, especially those in the alpha and theta brainwave range, are linked with relaxation, deep meditation, and even states of creative insight. When the brain hears a tone or pattern within this range, it often begins to synchronize or entrain to that frequency. This process, called brainwave entrainment, is one reason why sound can so effectively alter our state of mind. It's not magic, it's resonance. It's biology responding to vibration, but perhaps just as important as the frequency is the quality of the sound. In Zen echoes, there is intentional use of space. Silence is not treated as absence, but as texture. It gives the tones room to breathe. It allows the listener's awareness to expand. This interplay between sound and silence mimics the way breath flows in and out, or the way waves rise and fall on the shore. It teaches patience, it teaches presence, and in doing so, it teaches the body how to return to a calmer, more open state. We can also look at sound therapy from a psychological angle. When we listen to familiar songs, we often evoke memories or emotions tied to them. That's because sound is deeply connected to the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotion. Zen echoes are designed not to trigger nostalgia or stories, but to create new emotional environments. They are neutral and open, meaning they give you the space to feel what needs to be felt without pushing you in any direction. They offer emotional holding, not emotional instruction. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. To sit with what is, gently, without judgment, without having to fix or explain. In clinical and wellness settings, sound therapy is increasingly being used to help with anxiety, insomnia, chronic pain, and even trauma. The key is that the sound must be intentional, balanced, and supportive. Not all sounds are therapeutic after all. Harsh or erratic noise can create tension, even if we don't consciously notice it. Zen echoes are created with the opposite intention: to soothe, to support, to soften, to provide a sonic balm for the system that is stretched too thin or caught in loops of overthinking. Even outside of clinical spaces, people report that regular listening to these kinds of soundscapes improves their quality of sleep, deepens their meditation, and reduces their stress levels. And perhaps most importantly, it helps create an inner habit of slowing down, of making time for pause. In a world where we're constantly asked to speed up, Zen echoes gently offer us another way. They are not solutions in the traditional sense. They don't solve problems or offer advice. What they do is much more subtle, and perhaps more essential. They change the environment inside you. They create a space where healing can begin on its own, without force, without pressure. A space where restlessness is not resisted, but met with resonance. Where stillness is not imposed, but emerges naturally, like a breath released after holding it too long. To truly appreciate the unique quality of Zen echoes, we have to explore the building blocks that make them what they are. These soundscapes don't arise by chance. Every tone, every silence, every resonance is chosen with care. And unlike traditional music, which often aims to entertain or to guide emotion in a specific direction, Zen echoes aim to create a space where emotion can unfold naturally, where the mind can rest without demand, where sound acts less like a melody and more like a presence, constant, open, and grounded. At the heart of this experience are the instruments and natural elements used to create the sound. But even instrument might not be the right word, because many of these sources aren't played in the conventional sense. They're allowed to resonate, allowed to decay, allowed to take up space. The sounds used in Zen echoes are often drawn from traditional Eastern instruments, such as the shakuhachi flute, the rin bell, or the mokujio, a wooden fish drum gently struck in rhythmic patterns. Each of these has a character of voice, a history of being used in meditative or spiritual settings for centuries. Their tones are rich, spacious, and emotionally transparent. But Zen echoes go further than tradition. They incorporate textures from the natural world: water, wind, fire, distant thunder. These sounds aren't there just for decoration. They're included because they do something to the nervous system. The trickle of water invites a slower breath. The distant rustle of leaves quiets inner noise. The low, nearly imperceptible rumble of thunder connects us to something vast, something beyond ourselves. It's as if the world itself is whispering, "You can let go now." Layering is a key part of how Zen echoes are created. Unlike a song that moves from beginning to end in a straight line, these soundscapes evolve slowly, with sounds appearing, overlapping, then fading back into silence. A tone may stretch out for 30 seconds or longer. A bell might chime just once, then disappear completely. This unpredictability isn't chaotic, it's organic. It mirrors how things happen in nature, where no two waves are the same, no two breezes repeat exactly. This non-linear progression allows the listener to stop anticipating and start observing, and that shift from control to curiosity is one of the most important aspects of what makes these echoes so restorative. Equally essential is the use of space within the sound. In most forms of modern audio production, the goal is to fill the spectrum, to create a sense of fullness, of richness, often layering tracks upon tracks to keep the ear constantly engaged. Zen echoes take the opposite approach. They lean into emptiness. They create sonic space that invites the mind to breathe. There might be long pauses between tones, gentle fades, soft echoes that trail off into the distance, leaving you in that delicate, fertile silence. It's not just what you hear that matters, it's what you don't hear. The gaps, the air, the permission to pause. There's also an intentional use of spatial perception in how the sound is mixed. With the right headphones or speakers, it can feel like the tones are moving not just around you, but within you. A bell may seem to rise from the center of your chest. A wave of low frequency might feel like it's washing behind your back. This immersive design is not just aesthetic. It's meant to activate a fuller sensory presence. When sound feels embodied, the mind has an easier time anchoring into the moment. Sometimes, Zen echoes include sounds that are barely noticeable at first. A faint scraping, a soft wooden knock, a single drop of water. These micro sounds train the ear to listen deeply. They reward patience. They create a sense of intimacy, as though the environment is not just around you, but listening back. And that changes the dynamic. You're no longer just hearing the sound. You're in relationship with it. You're part of the field, not separate from it. This kind of listening can also evoke subtle emotional shifts. A low drone may gently mirror a sense of sadness or calm. A high chime might brighten the field, lift the breath. But again, these are not manipulative sounds. They aren't telling you what to feel. They're offering emotional textures you can lean into, or not. They leave room for your experience to be whatever it is. And that kind of emotional spaciousness is powerful. It lets us reconnect with parts of ourselves that are often muted or rushed past in daily life. In many ways, the components of Zen Echoes are like the brushstrokes of a painter working with fog and light rather than color and form. They work not by clearly defining boundaries, but by suggesting mood, inviting sensation, allowing meaning to arise slowly and naturally. The instruments, the natural elements, the intentional silences, all of these pieces come together to form something more than the sum of their parts. They form a listening space, a place where stillness and sound exist in quiet partnership. So when you encounter these echoes, don't rush to make sense of them. Don't try to follow a storyline or extract a message. Just be with them. Let the sounds unfold at their own pace. Let them move around you and through you. Let them be unfamiliar. And in that unfamiliarity, notice what softens, what shifts, what opens. Because in the end, Zen Echoes are not about sound alone. They're about what sound allows us to hear in ourselves when we finally stop to listen. Creating a soundscape like Zen Echoes is not a simple act of composition. It's a process of intention, subtle awareness, and emotional craftsmanship. It begins not with a melody or a beat, but with a feeling, a sense of what kind of space you want to hold. It might start with a single sound, a chime, a breath, a soft pulse, something that speaks without speaking, something that resonates beyond the ear, and from that first tone, everything else begins to unfold, not rushed, not planned in detail, but allowed to emerge layer by layer, like mist rising from a still lake. The process of composing Zen Echoes requires deep listening long before the first sound is recorded. The composer must tune in, not just to their own state of mind, but to the imagined listener. Who are they making this for? Someone caught in traffic. Someone lying awake at night chasing sleep. Someone searching for a thread of calm in the middle of a busy day. With each tone and pause, the composer builds an environment designed to meet that need. Not to distract from it, but to walk alongside it. The intention is never to escape reality, but to soften the edges of it, to create space inside the noise. Sound choices are made slowly and deliberately. Before any track is laid down, the tone palette is selected, often a small collection of instruments, textures, and frequencies that will shape the emotional contour of the piece. This palette may include low drones, light harmonic overtones, gentle field recordings, and a few resonant percussive tones like temple bowls or wooden claves. These sounds are not chosen for novelty or variety, but for their capacity to soothe, to stabilize, to open the inner ear. Sometimes, a sound will be tested in the space and rejected, not because it's unpleasant, but because it disrupts the delicate balance of quiet and presence the piece is trying to hold. Timing is everything. There's a kind of breath built into each composition, not literal inhalation and exhalation, but the musical equivalent. Swells and releases, presence and absence. A sound may ring out, then fade, followed by silence long enough for the listener to forget it. Then another tone appears gentle, like a thought arising uninvited. The structure doesn't follow a verse or chorus. It follows an emotional arc, one that moves at the pace of awareness, and that arc is deeply rooted in rhythm. Not rhythm as beat, but rhythm as movement. As the slow, almost tidal pull of one moment into the next. Environmental calibration also plays a crucial role in the creative process. The composer doesn't work in isolation from the outside world. They consider where this sound will live. Will it be played through headphones or over a small speaker beside a yoga mat? Will it drift through a darkened room at night or accompany a solitary walk through trees? The setting matters. It informs not just the technical aspects of mixing and spatial placement, but also the emotional tone of the piece. A soundscape designed for deep sleep will feel different than one meant for gentle movement. The energy is calibrated accordingly, never high, never loud, but tuned to match the intention behind the listening moment. Even the pace of sound emergence is intentional. In Zen Echoes, new elements are introduced gradually. A new layer may appear 10 minutes into the experience, so subtly that it feels like it's always been there. There's no sudden drop, no dramatic transition. Everything unfolds in a way that encourages the listener to stop bracing, to stop anticipating, to sink deeper. The slow layering teaches the nervous system that nothing unexpected is coming, that it's safe to let go. There is also a kind of humility built into this process. The composer isn't trying to showcase technical skill or innovate for innovation's sake. The ego steps back. The goal is to serve the listener, not impress them. And that intention is felt. You can hear it in the restraint, in the patience, in the way no sound fights for your attention. The piece doesn't perform. It holds space. It's there for you quietly, steadily, no matter your emotional weather. And yet it is not purely passive. Within this stillness, there's motion, subtle shifts, quiet emotional currents. The tone may darken slightly, then brighten. A texture might dissolve, revealing a new resonance beneath it. These movements are slow, but significant. They mirror the internal shifts happening in the listener. As the body relaxes, the sounds seem to change, even if they don't. The relationship deepens. The listener and the sound become co-creators of the moment. This is where Zen Echoes differ from background music. They aren't meant to be ignored. They're not just ambience. They're invitations to notice, to slow down, to inhabit your breath, your body, your present. And because of that, the process of composing them requires a kind of emotional presence that is rare in today's sound production landscape. It's less like engineering and more like caretaking. As the final layers come together, the composer listens again, not critically, but receptively. They listen with the ears of the listener, feeling for dissonance not in tone, but in experience. Does this sound invite or intrude? Does it open space or fill it unnecessarily? These questions guide the final mix. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is left to chance. The final piece is not a performance, it's a sanctuary, a quiet place built out of sound. And when it's ready, when the sounds breathe together, when the silences feel alive, when the emotional current flows smoothly and gently, it is released, not just into the world, but into your world, waiting for you to enter, to listen, to remember that stillness is never far. It only waits for us to hear it. Listener readiness is often the most overlooked, yet profoundly impactful part of the Zen Echo experience. You see, even the most intricately crafted soundscape cannot work its subtle alchemy unless the listener is prepared. Not perfectly, not rigidly, but with an openness to presence. It's like stepping into a quiet forest. You can rush through it, headphones on, thinking of emails and errands, or you can pause, take a breath, and let the forest in. One choice brings motion, the other brings stillness. Both are possible, but only one allows the deeper experience to unfold. Setting the space is where this begins, and it's less about what the room looks like, and more about what it invites. Whether you're sitting on a meditation cushion, lying down on a couch, or simply pausing at your desk between tasks, your environment can either support your journey inward or interrupt it. So before you press play, take a moment to clear the space, not just physically, but energetically. Dim the lights, turn off notifications, close unnecessary tabs in your mind as much as on your screen. Even the smallest gesture, like lighting a candle or taking one deep, conscious breath, can act as a signal to your system. Something different is happening now. You are entering a space of listening. And then there's the posture of attention, not just physically, but mentally. You don't need to sit like a monk or breathe like a yogi. You just need to be present. But presence, especially in a restless world, can feel elusive. That's why it helps to ground yourself in the body first. Feel the weight of your body supported by the chair or the floor. Notice the contact points, feet to ground, hands to lap, back to seat. These small anchors bring your awareness from thought to sensation, from concept to experience. They help transition you from doing to being. Once grounded, you might bring attention to your breath, not to control it, but simply to notice it. Is it shallow, deep, tight, loose? No judgment, just curiosity, just awareness. You are preparing to receive, not to analyze, not to expect, but to listen with your whole being. This is the foundation Zen Echoes rest upon, not the technical perfection of the sound, but the quality of your presence. Without it, the deepest frequencies go unheard. It's worth noting that readiness doesn't always look like calm. You might arrive in the middle of a stressful moment or feeling scattered and overwhelmed. That's okay. In fact, that's the very reason Zen Echoes exist. Not to meet a perfected version of you, but to meet you exactly as you are. And sometimes the most powerful listening happens, not when we feel most centered, but when we are most in need of centering. When we're cracked open, when we've run out of distractions. That's when sound can enter like water into dry soil, slowly, gently, but deeply. What helps here is approaching the experience not as a task, but as a welcome. Let the sound come to you. Let it wash over you, around you, through you. Resist the urge to get it right. There is no wrong way to listen, except perhaps to listen with the expectation that something specific should happen. The irony of Zen Echoes is that they are most effective when you stop trying to get something from them. When you simply let them be what they are, and allow yourself to be who you are. You may notice over time that your readiness begins to arise more naturally, that the ritual of pausing before listening becomes something you look forward to, that the body, once restless, begins to soften more quickly, that the breath slows without instruction. This is not magic, it's memory. Your system remembers how to be still. It remembers how to listen. And the more often you return to this space, the easier it becomes to access. There are also practical ways to support this readiness. Choosing a consistent time of day can help. Perhaps early morning, when the world is still quiet, or late at night, when your thoughts have softened. Using the same headphones or speakers creates familiarity. Even returning to a particular piece you love can provide a sense of safety and ease. These outer consistencies support the inner shift. They create an atmosphere where readiness doesn't have to be summoned. It simply arrives. And if distraction does arise, and it will, don't resist it. Don't scold yourself for drifting. Just return, gently, kindly, over and over. This is not a practice of perfection. It's a practice of return. And in that return, something subtle begins to unfold. A new relationship with stillness, a new capacity for presence, a deepening intimacy with your own awareness. So when you come to Zen Echoes, come not with expectation, but with invitation. Set your space not like a stage, but like a resting place. Sit or lie down not like a student, but like someone arriving home. Breathe, listen, let go, and let the sound do what it was made to do. Not to impress, not to change you, but to meet you, hold you, and remind you of what quiet truly feels like when you're ready to receive it. The journey into the first hour of Zen Echoes begins not with a declaration, but with an invitation. A soft threshold, barely perceptible, like the moment just before dusk, when light starts to shift and shadows stretch a little longer. It is not a jarring beginning. There is no dramatic entry. Instead, you arrive slowly, almost without noticing, as if the sound has been there all along and you've only just begun to hear it. The opening tones are designed with care. Often they begin as simple textures, a low drone, a gentle swell, maybe a distant bell resonating through space. These sounds hold a kind of emotional neutrality. They don't tell you how to feel, but they open a space in which feeling can arise. And that is the purpose of the first phase, to center you. Not to quiet your mind by force, but to shift your focus gently inward, to create a field of attention wide and soft, where restlessness can begin to settle without being silenced. At this point, the breath becomes important, not because you have to breathe in a particular way, but because sound often draws attention back to the body. You may find yourself breathing more deeply, more slowly, without even trying. You may begin to notice how your ribs expand, how your shoulders drop just a bit. These are signs, not of doing something right, but of the nervous system beginning to recognize safety. And that safety is the ground on which all deeper listening rests. The pacing of the sound in this first hour is intentional. Tones emerge like ripples, with plenty of space between them. Silence is not empty here. It's alive. It's a space where the body can breathe, where the mind can soften, where emotion can rise and fall without judgment. The rhythm is slow, like waves reaching the shore and retreating again. There's nothing to follow, no pattern to predict. This absence of structure is part of what helps the mind let go. We're so used to expecting the next thing, so conditioned to anticipate, to prepare, to react. But Zen Echoes begin by offering you a space where nothing is expected of you at all. Within this environment, subtle shifts begin to take place. Maybe you start to feel the temperature of the room more clearly. Maybe you notice the way your hands rest on your lap. These small moments of embodiment are important. They're signs that attention is turning from the outer world to the inner one. You are beginning to inhabit the space, not just with your ears, but with your full presence. And that is where transformation begins, not through force, but through attention. As the first hour continues, the soundscape becomes slightly more dimensional. Layers deepen. A second tone might appear, a soft harmonic drifting beneath the original drone. A new texture may flicker at the edges of awareness, like the feeling of a breeze across skin. These additions are not meant to stimulate, but to enrich the space, to give the listener more to rest upon. Still, everything moves slowly. Nothing rushes in. The goal is to invite, not to overwhelm. This part of the journey often brings about a natural release. You might yawn. Your eyes may soften or close. Your thoughts might start to wander less. Or you may find yourself drifting in and out of a light, dreamlike state. These shifts are part of the nervous system downshifting, moving from alertness to ease. The body knows this rhythm. It just needs time to remember. and Zen echoes give it that time. Emotional responses may also begin to surface, not in any dramatic way, just small waves. A quiet sadness, a warm memory, a touch of longing or peace. The sounds don't push these feelings, they make space for them. And because nothing is required of you, you're free to simply observe, to notice, to let the feelings rise, float, and pass like clouds. Around the midpoint of the hour, the tones may grow slightly fuller, still soft, still restrained, but with more weight, more warmth. The space around the listener becomes more defined, more immersive. If you're wearing headphones, it may feel as if the sound is moving through you, not just around you. This deepening of presence is subtle, but significant. It marks the shift from passive hearing to active listening, from outer awareness to inner immersion. And yet, nothing ever becomes intense. There are no spikes, no surprises. The pace remains slow, deliberate. This consistency is crucial. It builds trust, and trust allows the body to surrender further. By now, even if your thoughts return or your focus wanders, it's easier to come back. You've entered a different relationship with your environment. The sound no longer feels like something you're listening to. It feels like something you're inside of. As the hour nears its close, the soundscape may begin to thin slightly, not vanish but simplify. One layer fades, another becomes more spacious. It's not a resolution, not a conclusion, just a gentle pulling back, a return to stillness, a soft reminder that nothing needs to last forever. That presence is not dependent on the sound. It remains with you. It remains within you. And when the final tone fades, when the last resonance slips into silence, you might notice a new kind of quiet. A quiet that wasn't there before. A quiet that feels fuller, richer, more alive. This is the result of the first hour of Zen Echoes. A centering, a soft turning inward, and it's only the beginning. As we move into the second hour of Zen Echoes, there's a subtle but noticeable shift. The space we've created together, through presence, patience, and gentle sound, begins to deepen. By now you've settled. Your body has likely released some of its tension. Your mind has softened around the edges, and your awareness, which may have started scattered or distracted, has begun to gather into a steadier rhythm. This is the phase where the journey inward expands, not suddenly, but organically, like a flower slowly unfolding toward the light. The tones begin to stretch. Harmonics grow richer, more resonant, filling the space like breath fills the lungs. Here, the sound is less about centering and more about deepening. It draws you in, not forcefully, but with a kind of gravity. Like sinking into warm water, the deeper you go, the less effort is required to stay present. There's a quiet strength in this hour, a grounded spaciousness that supports you, surrounds you, and gently carries your awareness into more subtle terrain. This is the hour of internal focus, where the noise of the outer world fades into the background and the inner world becomes more vivid. You might begin to notice thoughts passing by with more clarity, yet they feel less sticky, less demanding. Emotions may surface, too, not because the sound creates them, but because the space invites honesty. And when we create enough stillness, what's true often rises to meet us. The sound doesn't judge, doesn't explain, it holds. And in that holding, healing can happen. Tonal elements now begin to shimmer just slightly. Soft overtones, distant resonances, warm mid-range textures that feel almost like memory. There's a sense of layering, of unfolding, but without drama. These sounds don't ask questions or seek answers. They simply exist, like light on water, like wind across open fields. And as you listen, you may begin to feel a loosening, not of something specific, but of something deep, something old, like the body letting go of a story it didn't know it was still carrying. Throughout this second hour, the rhythm of your breath may sync more easily with the pace of the sound. You might begin to feel time differently, less linear, more cyclical. like waves or the slow turning of the earth. This is entrainment, yes, but it's more than that. It's coherence. It's your body, mind, and environment beginning to speak the same language. One of slowness, of receptivity, of deep and gentle awareness. And yet even here, there is space for contrast. At moments, a sound might rise slightly, a low drone might pulse more fully, or a single resonant tone might stretch longer, deeper, like a bell calling through fog. These are not interruptions. They are invitations. Invitations to feel, to notice, to remember that even in rest, energy flows. That stillness is not stagnation. It's dynamic, alive, ever moving beneath the surface. This hour also holds space for release. Sometimes in stillness we find grief, or tenderness, or longing. Sometimes joy, sometimes nothing at all. Just a quiet presence, a soft returning. Whatever arises, it's welcome. Zen echoes aren't there to fix it or define it. They simply stay with you, like a friend sitting silently beside you in the dark. They don't need to understand to offer comfort. They simply are. The layering of the sound here is more fluid, more immersive. Textures move not just from left to right, but from front to back, top to bottom. If you're wearing headphones, it may feel like sound is moving through you, gently tracing the shape of your awareness. These spatial dynamics are subtle, but they serve an important purpose. They help the listener surrender even more fully into the experience, anchoring attention not in thought, but in sensation, in feeling. And as you remain within this sonic cocoon, the boundaries between self and sound may begin to blur. This isn't about becoming lost. It's about remembering your connection. You are not separate from the sound. You are not separate from this moment. You are not separate from the stillness that's always been waiting quietly beneath all the noise. As the hour progresses, tones may begin to thin again, very gently, very gradually. What was once richly layered might slowly return to simplicity. The drone softens. The harmonics fade. A bell tone might echo once, then dissolve. But there is no sense of ending here, just transition, just a breath between moments. The stillness is not gone. It remains like a quiet echo inside your chest. And by the close of this second hour, you may feel something new, not dramatic but profound. A steadier center, a clearer gaze. A sense of being rooted, even as the world continues to turn around you. You may not have solved anything, you may not have figured anything out, but you've listened, you've stayed, you've softened, and that in itself is the work. This is the gift of the second hour of Zen Echoes, a deepening, a remembering, a falling inward towards something whole, something quiet, something real. As the second hour fades into the third, there's a moment of almost imperceptible transition. No obvious cue, no abrupt change, just a quiet shift, the kind that happens beneath the surface, like the way the air feels different just before dawn, the way silence deepens after a final note. This final hour of Zen Echoes is not about discovery, it's about integration. It's about allowing what has already opened inside you to settle, to find its place, to rest. By now, your awareness has likely grown more spacious. You may notice that thoughts no longer arrive with the same urgency, or if they do, they pass more gently, like clouds drifting across a wide sky. This is the natural consequence of immersion, not escape but intimacy, a deeper contact with the present moment, with yourself. And in this final stretch, the sounds are shaped not to guide, but to accompany, to be there quietly, faithfully, like breath in the background. The tones here become more subtle, fewer layers, more space between elements. A single chime, echoing far off in the soundscape, might linger longer before it fades. A warm drone might stretch out in the distance, low and steady, like earth beneath your feet. These aren't sounds that ask anything of you. They don't want your attention. They don't pull or prod. They are simply present, like quiet companions walking beside you in the twilight. And that's what this hour becomes, a walk. Not a march toward a goal, not a race toward enlightenment, just a walk, a moving through being with. The sound continues, like a path beneath your steps, soft and unobtrusive, asking nothing, offering everything, each tone a breath, each silence a pause, each moment held without agenda. You may find yourself reflecting, not through thinking, but through sensing. The emotional residue of earlier hours might still shimmer in your awareness. A gentle ache, a tender joy, an unspoken truth rising softly in your chest. And as the sound holds you, you don't need to explain these things. You don't even need to understand them. You just let them exist. Let them be part of your inner landscape, because this is the hour of allowing, the hour of quiet integration. Sometimes during this phase, a listener may feel a wave of gratitude arise, unprompted, unforced, just a warm awareness of being here, of having taken time, of having given yourself something rare and necessary space. And it's not always loud, this feeling. It might be a quiet smile, a loosening in the jaw, a subtle warmth behind the eyes. Gratitude not as performance, but as presence. The structure of the sound here supports that. It becomes more ambient, more transparent. You may begin to hear more of the room around you, your own breath, the hum of distant life beyond the walls. But these aren't distractions, they're part of it now. The boundary between internal and external has thinned. You are in the sound, and the sound is in you. You might feel as though you've slowed down so much. You're no longer watching the moment. You are the moment. You're not waiting for the next tone. You're not holding on to the last one. You're simply here in the in-between, fully listening, fully resting, fully present. And yet, even in this stillness, the sound continues to breathe. It does not stop, it moves slowly like the tide. You might notice a low resonance swell slightly, only to fall again. A barely audible shimmer appear and dissolve like mist. These shifts are not meant to lead you anywhere. They're meant to remind you the world is still turning. You are still here. Change is still happening even in silence. As the final portion of this hour begins, the sound thins further. More silence, more stillness. The echoes fade into longer spaces, like lanterns slowly disappearing over a dark lake. If you're still, you may feel as though the space around you has widened, not in distance, but in depth. The room feels softer, the air feels slower, and inside that slowness, something lingers, something essential, something true. There is no grand finale here, no climax, just the quiet continuation of presence. And that is the gift of the third hour. Not revelation, but return. Not insight, but rest. Not a breakthrough, but a soft exhale that reaches places words never could. You may find that when the sound finally ends, when the last tone fades into true silence, you don't want to move. You don't need to. There's nothing to rush back to. Just a simple awareness, sitting quietly in your chest. A feeling of being home, not in a place, but in a state of being. And perhaps, as you rest there, you'll realize something simple, something powerful, that this stillness has always been with you. Beneath the noise, beneath the rush. It was never far, it was never lost. It was only waiting for you to listen. After the echoes have faded and the sound has returned to silence, something often lingers, not in the air, but within you. A new sense of space, a quiet recalibration of the body, the breath, the mind. This afterglow is not simply the residue of sound, it's the sign of something deeper, something lasting. The process of listening, of resting, of attuning to stillness through sound, if practiced with consistency, leaves its mark. Not as a single moment of clarity, but as a slow transformation. One that unfolds over time, not in leaps, but in subtle, barely perceptible shifts. And over days, weeks, and months, these small shifts accumulate into something meaningful. This is the long-term effect of Zen Echoes. Not a quick fix, not a peak experience, but a quiet rewiring of the nervous system and emotional rhythms. With repeated listening, the mind begins to soften its grip on constant thought. The body begins to unlearn patterns of tension. The heart begins to reopen. These aren't dramatic events. They happen in the background, quietly, like a landscape changing with the seasons. It starts with awareness. As you listen regularly, you become more sensitive to the internal noise, the spinning thoughts, the subtle restlessness, the undercurrent of urgency that so often hums beneath daily life. This awareness isn't always comfortable at first. In fact, it can be disorienting to notice just how noisy the mind has become. But in that noticing, a choice appears: to meet that restlessness with presence, or to keep turning away. And if you stay with it, gently, compassionately, you begin to change your relationship to it. It no longer controls you. It becomes something you can observe, something you can hold. And something remarkable happens when you hold your restlessness instead of fighting it. It begins to lose its power. The waves of distraction don't stop entirely, but they stop pulling you under. You start to notice the spaces between the thoughts, the pauses between the worries, and in those spaces you find stillness, you find breath, you find yourself. Over time, your nervous system adapts to this new way of being. The body begins to anticipate the return to calm. Your baseline level of tension may lower. You might start to notice that you react less impulsively to stress, that you pause more before speaking, that your sleep deepens, that your attention lasts longer, not because you've forced change, but because you've practiced presence. And the sound has supported that practice. There's also an emotional shift that often accompanies this. Repeated listening can help uncover feelings that have long been buried beneath the business: grief, joy, fear, hope. These feelings may emerge slowly, but they do come. And when they do, Zen Echoes provide a safe container for them. You don't have to explain or analyze what you're feeling. You just listen. And in the listening, the emotion moves. It releases. You may also begin to notice more of the world around you. Small things. The texture of air in the morning. The sound of footsteps on pavement. The color of light in a quiet room. These aren't things you need to seek out. They arrive on their own because you've made space for them. You've cleared some of the inner noise. And in that space, the world reintroduces itself. Not louder, but clearer. Not more exciting, but more vivid. This presence, cultivated slowly through sound, begins to weave itself into daily life. You might find that you don't need music or media in every moment. That silence becomes not just bearable but welcome. That you crave stillness, not as an escape but as a return. You may begin to build small rituals around listening. A few minutes in the morning to ground. A short pause in the afternoon to reset. A deeper session before bed to release the weight of the day. These aren't rules or requirements. They're rhythms that your system learns to trust. There is also something deeper that emerges over time, a kind of inner steadiness, a rootedness. You may still have stress, still face challenges, but you'll find they don't shake you in quite the same way, because underneath it all, you've found a thread of quiet that can't be touched by the noise. A place inside that knows how to return to stillness, that knows how to listen. And while this kind of change is often hard to describe, it's deeply felt. Others may notice it too, a softness in your presence, a calm in your voice, a patience that wasn't there before. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more yourself. The self that was always beneath the rush and noise. The self that remembers how to be. In the long arc of listening, Zen Echoes become more than sound. They become a way of life, a practice of returning, a map not of escape, but of arrival. Each session reinforces the last. Each moment of stillness echoes into the next, until one day you no longer need to seek silence. You simply hear it. In the wind, in your breath, in the space between thoughts. And in that silence, you know something has changed. When Zen Echoes begin to take root in your day, to day life, their effect becomes more than occasional calm. It becomes a shift in how you move through the world. They start, quite naturally, to become part of your rhythm, not something separate from life, but woven into it. Just as the sound of wind can become part of how you walk beneath trees, or how the ticking of a quiet clock becomes the background to your thoughts, Zen echoes begin to blend into your living, not by demanding attention, but by offering presence. One of the most effective ways to bring this experience into daily life is by ritualizing your listening, not in a rigid, scheduled way, but in a way that honors the act as meaningful. You might start by choosing one moment in the day to listen, not while doing something else, not in passing, but as an act of pausing, of arriving. Early mornings are a beautiful time for this. Before the world asks anything of you, before the messages, before the headlines, just you, your breath, and the sound. Even a few minutes of Zen echoes in the morning can set a tone, not just of quiet, but of clarity. It's not about feeling instantly calm. It's about beginning your day from a place of contact with yourself, with your surroundings, with stillness. And that contact often carries forward subtly. You move a little more slowly. You notice things you might have missed. The quality of your attention shifts. As the day unfolds, there are other natural openings for this kind of listening. Midday, for instance, can be an opportunity for recalibration, perhaps after a difficult conversation, or a demanding project, or just a long morning of mental noise. Even 2 to 3 minutes of intentional listening can act like a breath of fresh air for the nervous system. A single tone, repeated gently, a short pattern of sound fading into silence. These small moments can be surprisingly potent. They remind your body that it's safe to slow down, that stillness is not the opposite of productivity, it's the foundation for it. Evening listening offers something different, a kind of release. After a day of doing and thinking and trying and processing, Zen echoes provide a way to let it all go, not by forcing the mind to be quiet, but by giving it something soft to rest on. The sounds of the evening can be lower, longer, deeper. They echo the descent into night, into rest, into the in-between state where sleep begins. Listening during this time can act as a signal to the body the work is done. It's okay now. You can let go. Some people like to make listening part of existing routines. Before meditation, before journaling, while taking a warm bath or lying down in bed. Others use it in movement, a slow walk, gentle stretching, even sitting quietly with a cup of tea. The point is not the activity. The point is the attention, the willingness to pause and turn inward, even briefly. And while headphones can enhance the intimacy of the sound, it's not a requirement. You can play Zen echoes on speakers in the background while cooking, or folding laundry, or preparing for sleep. The goal is not to create the perfect setting every time. It's to create a relationship with stillness, to become familiar with it, to let it be part of your life, not only in planned sessions, but in quiet moments, tucked between the rush. You may also notice that the more you listen, the more you begin to hear, not just in the recordings, but in life itself. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of wood beneath your feet, the rustle of leaves. These sounds are always present, but they're often drowned out by thought, by distraction, by the sheer volume of doing. As your inner landscape grows quieter, these outer details start to come into focus, not in a way that demands anything of you, but in a way that reminds you this moment is alive, this moment is enough. Over time, these small acts of listening create a kind of memory in the body, a thread of stillness that you can return to, not just in quiet settings, but even in moments of difficulty, a stressful phone call, a crowded commute, an unexpected disruption. The sound may not be present, but its echo is. You've practiced turning inward. You've learned what it feels like to listen deeply, and that practice stays with you. And in this way, Zen echoes are not limited to the headphones or the speakers or the recordings. They become a posture of life, a way of relating, a softness toward your own mind, a gentleness in how you meet each moment. Whether the world is noisy or quiet, whether your thoughts are stormy or still, this isn't about perfection. You'll still get distracted, still feel stress, still have days that slip by without a single mindful pause. That's okay. The point isn't to live in stillness all the time. The point is to remember it exists, to know you can return, to know that the door is always open, and every time you press play, you walk through it. As Zen echoes become a more regular part of your day, you may begin to notice something else. How naturally they begin to integrate with other practices that nourish the mind and body. These aren't separate rituals competing for your attention. They're complementary currents, each enhancing the flow of the other. Listening doesn't replace mindfulness. It doesn't override meditation or breathwork or movement. Instead, it weaves into those practices, deepening their effect, softening the transition into presence. One of the most powerful ways to experience this is by pairing Zen echoes with meditation. If you've ever found it difficult to sit in silence, if your mind resists stillness or floods with noise the moment you try to turn inward, sound can serve as a bridge, not a distraction but an anchor, a gentle hand that guides your awareness back again and again. You don't have to fight your thoughts. You don't have to achieve perfect focus. You just have to listen. And in that listening, stillness finds you. Some people prefer to begin their meditation with a few minutes of Zen echoes before transitioning into silence. Others let the sound accompany the entire session, forming a background hum that quiets the mind without pushing it. There's no right or wrong way. What matters is your attention, your willingness to arrive, and your ability to stay. The sound doesn't lead you, it supports you. It meets you where you are and offers the ground beneath your presence. Breathwork also pairs beautifully with Zen echoes. Breath is rhythm, it is pattern, it is the original pulse of your existence. And when you combine that natural rhythm with tones that mirror, complement, or even gently entrain it, something begins to harmonize. Inhale, a swelling drone. Exhale, a fading bell. Not perfectly timed, not mechanically matched, but naturally aligned. The sound becomes a kind of breath of its own, and as you breathe with it, you begin to attune your system not only to the body's cycle, but to a deeper sense of internal coherence. Even simple awareness of breath, no counting, no control, feels different in the presence of these tones. The sound opens a space around each breath, a cushion of stillness that helps you stay with it a little longer. The inhale feels softer, the exhale more complete. This gentle relationship between breath and sound can ground you in moments of stress, of fatigue, of emotional overwhelm. You don't have to fix anything. Just breathe. Just listen. Zen echoes can also be woven into mindful movement, especially slower, more intentional forms like yoga, stretching, or walking meditation. Unlike structured music that might push a tempo or mood, these soundscapes invite fluidity. They create a spacious atmosphere in which movement is not performance, but presence. You're not trying to match a beat. You're simply letting your body respond to the tone. A stretch becomes a gesture, a breath becomes a transition. Movement slows, not because you're told to slow down, but because there is finally space to do so. For those who journal or engage in self-inquiry, Zen echoes provide a quiet backdrop for inner exploration. The tones offer emotional support, not in the sense of guidance, but in the way they soften the environment. The mind may feel more honest, the heart more open. Words rise not from urgency, but from clarity. You may find that certain patterns become easier to see, certain insights easier to hold. Not because the sound has given you answers, but because it's helped you create the inner quiet needed to hear your own. And this layering doesn't have to be formal, or structured. You don't need a playlist of practices or a fixed routine. You just need the willingness to be with yourself. Zen Echoes simply expand what's possible in that space. They invite gentleness into effort, spaciousness into structure, stillness into action. In fact, what's often most surprising is how these sounds can change the energy of a room, even when no one is consciously listening. A short tone playing while preparing a meal, a low hum while reading or folding clothes, a single bell tone in a shared space can shift the mood from scattered to settled. Sound becomes not just something you hear, but something that holds you, that holds the space you live in. And when that holding is consistent, it begins to rewire your relationship to the everyday. Life slows, life softens, and your awareness finds new places to root itself. The beauty of this integration is that it doesn't demand anything more of you. It doesn't add pressure to your schedule or complexity to your rituals. It simply enhances what's already there. It reminds you that mindfulness doesn't have to be serious or rigid. It can be gentle, it can be sound, it can be presence made audible. So whether you are breathing, moving, reflecting, or simply sitting, know that Zen Echoes can be part of that. Not to change the practice, but to deepen it, to soften it, to remind you again and again that in this moment right here you can listen, you can feel, you can be, and that is always enough. At the core of Zen Echoes lies a quiet truth. Sound, when held with care and offered with intention, becomes more than art. It becomes presence. And when presence is practiced over time, it shifts the very structure of how we experience ourselves and the world. It's not about what the sound does to you, but what it allows in you. And when we take that inward stillness and carry it outward into our daily rhythms, we begin to see that Zen Echoes don't end when the track stops. They ripple forward, becoming a way of being, not just a way of listening. This idea isn't new. In the Zen tradition, practice has always been seen as something integrated into the ordinary, sitting in silence, sweeping the floor, pouring tea. Each action, when done with attention, becomes sacred, not because it's religious, but because it's real. Because in that moment, you're fully there. Zen Echoes follow this same path. The sound may begin in a speaker or in your ears, but its echoes are meant to follow you, into conversation, into stillness, into the business and the beauty of your life. So how do we sustain this resonance? How do we take what we felt in stillness and allow it to live beyond the listening session? It starts by noticing, by paying attention to the small shifts. Maybe your breath feels slower in the morning. Maybe you pause before responding to something that once triggered you. Maybe the world sounds just a little softer. These are not dramatic signs, but they are real. They are evidence that something inside is recalibrating. Let yourself notice them. Let yourself name them. Not to grasp or control, but to acknowledge. You're building something, quietly, gently, and every act of noticing strengthens it. Sustaining the impact of Zen Echoes also means giving yourself permission to return often. Not out of obligation, but out of kindness. Think of the sound as a friend, not one who demands your time, but one who's always there when you need them. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment. You don't need to feel ready. You can return in the middle of a storm or in a quiet afternoon. You can return even if you've drifted, especially then, because the practice is not about staying still. It's about remembering stillness again and again. And in between sessions, you begin to cultivate what we might call echo awareness. It's the ability to tune in to subtle internal cues. Maybe you're holding tension in your jaw. Maybe your thoughts are racing. Maybe your shoulders have started to rise without you noticing. These are the moments when a single breath or a brief moment of sound can reset everything. You don't need a full hour. Sometimes all it takes is 10 seconds of awareness. A note, a breath, a pause. This awareness also helps us create healthier boundaries around stimulation. The modern world doesn't pause for us. It offers constant input: images, headlines, conversation, information, endless loops of reaction. But when we've practiced returning to stillness through sound, we develop a new kind of sensitivity. We begin to notice when we're saturated, when the noise is no longer useful. And from there we can choose to step back, to say no, to return to something quieter. That choice is the heart of sustaining resonance. Not the choice to escape life, but the choice to meet it from a different state of being. From a place that's less reactive, more grounded, more listening. You might even find yourself creating micro rituals throughout your day. A short tone before beginning work, a brief silence after reading something difficult, a deep breath before speaking. These aren't formal practices, they're touchstones, reminders, ways to let the echo return, not as memory, but as presence. And just as Zen echoes begin in simplicity, the sustainability of their impact also lives in the simple. You don't have to strive, you don't have to measure, you don't need progress charts or checklists. All you need is your attention. All you need is your willingness to meet each moment a little more gently. And over time, what once felt like an external experience, a sound entering your ears, becomes internal. It becomes your own tone of awareness, your own rhythm of presence, your own deep, grounded echo that walks with you. This isn't the kind of change that makes headlines. It's not loud, but it lasts, and it expands into how you listen to others, into how you speak, into how you rest and how you move. It becomes not something you do, but someone you are. That's the quiet promise of Zen Echoes, not to change your life in one moment, but to offer you again and again a gentle way to return to it. Sometimes, the most powerful transformation doesn't come from what we do during a listening session, but from what we carry with us after it ends. The resonance of Zen Echoes isn't meant to stay confined to those 3 hours. It's meant to stretch into our days, our habits, our relationships. It's meant to become part of how we live, not just how we rest. And when we commit to making space for that resonance over time, what we begin to see is not just the fading of restlessness, but the emergence of something more grounded, something more whole. One of the most beautiful ways this appears is in the small, almost imperceptible moments. You might be standing at the sink, water running over your hands, and suddenly you're aware of the temperature, the sound, the rhythm of your breath. Not analyzing, just noticing, just being. Or maybe you're in conversation, and instead of reacting, you pause. You hear not only the words being spoken, but the feeling beneath them. You respond with more presence, less urgency. These moments don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, but they are signs of real, embodied change. This shift in awareness, supported and reinforced by your time with Zen Echoes, begins to rewire your inner experience. Not through effort, but through repetition, through trust. You learn that stillness is not fragile, that quiet is not emptiness, that rest is not weakness. And as these truths settle more deeply, you begin to embody them. You carry them with you, not as performance, but as presence. This is what we mean when we speak of cognitive and somatic integration. The mind and body, often so at odds, begin to move together. You're not just thinking differently, you're feeling differently. Your body remembers what safety feels like, what space feels like, what it's like to be unhurried. This embodied knowing becomes a resource. It becomes a place you can return to, even when life grows loud, and life will grow loud. There will be days when you forget, when restlessness returns with its familiar hum, when noise surrounds you. This is not failure, this is the ebb and flow of practice. The goal isn't to eliminate chaos, it's to build the capacity to meet it, to hold it without becoming it. And when you've practiced returning to stillness through sound, that return becomes easier, more familiar, like stepping into a room you know by heart. There's also something deeper that begins to unfold, something less about technique and more about identity. As you spend more time in stillness, you may start to feel a subtle shift in how you see yourself. You are no longer just the thoughts that pass through your mind. You are not just the stress or the story or the role you play. You are the awareness beneath all of that. The quiet witness, the spacious field. This shift isn't intellectual, it's felt. It arises not from thinking differently, but from being differently. From sitting with sound until the sound falls away, and you're left with something more essential, a still point, a sense of center, a recognition of what's always been true, even when it's hard to remember. And from that center, something new becomes possible. Not just calm, but clarity. Not just less stress, but more connection. You begin to make choices from a deeper place. You begin to speak more gently, listen more fully, act more consciously. This is not perfection. This is alignment. It's your inner state beginning to shape your outer life. Of course, this doesn't mean every moment becomes peaceful. It doesn't mean you never feel restless again. But the difference is, now you know the way back. You've practiced the return. You've felt the rhythm of quiet. And you trust it, even when it's distant. Even when life feels too full or too fast. That trust becomes the thread, the echo. And that echo moves outward too. Others may begin to notice something different in you. Not necessarily what you say or do, but how you are. Your presence, your pacing, your attention. This quiet influence doesn't need to be named. It doesn't need to be understood. It just needs to be lived. The more this way of being becomes familiar, the more it expands. It touches how you rest, how you create, how you work, how you move through the world. It's no longer something you return to. It becomes something you carry. A stillness that walks beside you. A calm that lives beneath the surface. And it all begins with a sound, with a tone, with a breath. It begins with listening, not just to something outside of you, but to something within. And over time, that inner voice, the one that speaks without words, the one that hums beneath the noise, grows louder, clearer, stronger. This is the integration Zen Echoes invite, a movement from hearing to knowing, from listening to being, from sound to silence, from silence to self. There's something powerful about turning a moment into a ritual. It doesn't have to be ceremonial or elaborate. In fact, the most meaningful rituals are often the most simple. They're the ones you return to again and again, not because you're supposed to, but because something in you recognizes that this pause, this quiet act, brings you back to yourself. This is the space where Zen Echoes begin to take root in your daily life. Not just as an occasional listening session, but as a rhythm you move with, a steady pulse beneath the surface of your routine. Creating these rituals doesn't require anything special. You don't need a meditation room or special equipment. What you need is a willingness to pause, to designate small pockets of your day where sound becomes not background, but anchor, where you're not consuming the moment, you're inhabiting it, fully, quietly, awake. For some, the morning is the best time to begin, before the day accelerates, before you pick up your phone, before the world enters. You might set aside 10 minutes to sit with the sound. Let it fill the space. Let it greet you before any obligations take hold. This moment doesn't need to be productive. It doesn't need to lead to insight or accomplishment. It's simply there to remind you, before everything else, there is stillness. This act of beginning the day from a place of presence has a ripple effect. You may notice your breath stays slower through the morning, that decisions come with a little more clarity, that your pace becomes less reactive, more responsive. You've built a foundation, not by doing, but by being. Midday rituals offer a different kind of support. This is often when the noise is loudest, when tasks pile up, emotions run high, the body grows tense. And here, even 5 minutes of intentional sound can reset your internal climate. A gentle chime, a breath-like drone, a quiet pulse. These are not breaks from the day. They are re-entries, ways to return to the moment, ways to remind yourself that even in motion, you can carry quiet with you. Evening rituals, on the other hand, are about release. This is when you begin to let go, not all at once, not with a snap of the fingers, but gradually, gently. Zen echoes can be part of that unwinding. As you prepare for sleep, the sound becomes a signal to the nervous system. There's nothing left to do. You're safe to stop. You're allowed to soften. Whether you're lying down, stretching, or simply dimming the lights and sitting still, these moments of sound help bridge the gap between doing and resting. They don't force sleep. They make space for it to arrive. And over time, these rituals become more than actions. They become ways of knowing yourself, of tending to your mind, your heart, your body. They don't need to be perfect. You'll miss a day. You'll forget. Life will intervene. But the ritual remains. It waits. And when you return, it welcomes you without condition. You might even create physical cues to mark these moments. A particular seat by the window, a blanket across your lap, a candle you light before you listen. These small gestures create continuity. They tell the body, the mind, now we're here. Now we're listening. They ground the ritual in something tangible, something repeatable, something your nervous system can recognize. And if you live with others, these rituals can become shared. A moment of quiet together before the day begins. A soft sound filling the room before bed. No need to explain it. Just let the sound do the work. Let it hold the space. Let it become part of your environment, your relationships, your way of being. Zen echoes, in this way, become more than a practice. They become a rhythm, a return. Not something you have to schedule or enforce, but something that becomes second nature. You'll feel it when you skip it. Not from guilt, but from awareness, from the subtle sense that something is missing, that stillness wants to be invited back in. And with time, these rituals start to inform everything else. How you eat, how you listen, how you pause before speaking. They remind you that every moment has the potential to be sacred, not through grandeur, but through presence, through attention, through the simple act of listening. So let yourself build these rituals slowly, organically. Let them fit your life, your needs, your flow. Let them grow with you. And trust that every time you return to the sound, you are returning to something deeper than habit. You are returning to yourself. In the quiet of early morning, when the world is still holding its breath and everything feels slightly suspended, there is a natural stillness waiting to be heard. This is one of the most potent times to invite in the practice of listening. Before emails, before conversations, before the rhythm of the day takes over, there is a window, soft and unguarded. And within that window, Zen echoes can serve as more than sound. They can be a signal to your entire being. It's safe to begin slowly. You don't have to rush into the noise. You can choose to step forward with intention. Many people who build a morning ritual around sound find that it changes the way they relate to time itself. There's no hurry to achieve clarity, no need to force energy into movement. You begin by arriving, not into the day, but into yourself, into breath, into presence. This sets the tone not just for a peaceful morning, but for a grounded life. When you practice beginning with awareness, you begin to carry that awareness into the moments that follow. Afternoons, however, bring something different. By then, the demands of the day have usually accumulated. Even with the best of intentions, tension creeps in. Focus may start to scatter. Energy shifts. This is when a brief return to sound can act like a gentle reset. Not a break in the traditional sense, but a return to coherence. The body may still be active, the mind still engaged. But beneath that, a few moments of listening allow everything to resettle. It's not about stopping your momentum. It's about changing your relationship to it. A midday ritual could be as simple as 3 minutes of breath with tone. You might sit at your desk, place a hand on your chest, and let a soft, sustaining note wash over your awareness. Or you might take a walk, letting each footfall follow the rhythm of a bell fading into silence. The power of these rituals isn't in their length, it's in their intention, in the space they carve, in the message they send. Even now, in the middle of everything, I can return to stillness. Evening rituals, in contrast, are about dissolving. They're about letting the layers of the day fall away. You've done what you could. You've carried the conversations, the tasks, the responsibilities. Now you get to set them down. And here, Zen Echoes become something like a companion into sleep, a sonic doorway between effort and surrender. Some choose to listen while lying down. Others prepare for bed by dimming the lights, turning off the distractions, and simply letting the sound hold them. The tones don't command attention, but they do gently guide it, away from worry, away from planning, toward rest. You may not even notice when the transition happens. One moment you're listening, the next you're drifting. But the nervous system knows. It recognizes the safety. It responds. And when this becomes a ritual, something repeated not rigidly, but lovingly, it begins to signal to the body that sleep doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be something we chase. It can be something we prepare for with care. A soft landing, a slow unwinding, an invitation into quiet that feels more natural than forced. What's important to remember is that these rituals don't have to look like anyone else's. They don't have to be long. They don't have to be complex. They don't even have to be consistent at first. What they need is sincerity, a willingness to listen, to return, to let the sound be more than background noise, to let it be presence. Over time, the rituals you shape begin to shape you, not by changing who you are, but by revealing what's always been beneath the noise. A calmer breath, a clearer attention, a quieter kind of strength. These are not the results of effort. They're the results of listening, of choosing again and again to meet yourself where you are and to do so with gentleness. Zen Echoes are not just about the moments when you listen. They're about what those moments make possible. They're about the quality of attention you bring to your life, the way you open a door, the way you sit with silence, the way you listen even when there's no sound. So let your morning begin with stillness. Let your afternoon realign your breath. Let your evening dissolve into quiet, not because you have to, but because it feels right. Because somewhere deep inside, you know that rest isn't a luxury, it's a return. And you are always welcome there. There's a moment, sometime after you've welcomed stillness into your day again and again, when something subtle but profound begins to happen. The shift isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with clarity or fanfare. Instead, it creeps in gently, like morning light gradually dissolving darkness. Over time, you notice you've started hearing things differently, not louder, not clearer, but deeper. Sounds that once passed unnoticed begin to carry presence, texture, meaning. The hum of a refrigerator, the rhythm of footsteps, the distant rustle of leaves against the wind. Each becomes more than a background element. Each becomes an invitation. Zen Echoes do not teach you to avoid the world. They teach you how to meet it, more fully, more slowly, more openly. And one of the ways this happens is through a transformation in your relationship with everyday sound. Noise doesn't simply disappear, but your reaction to it softens. Where there was once resistance, there's a kind of curiosity. Instead of recoiling from sound, you listen into it. And in that act of listening, presence expands. You begin to hear the pause between a door closing and the next moment. The slight tremble in a friend's voice that speaks louder than their words. The rhythm of your own breath when you're doing nothing at all. These details are subtle, yes, but they're also sacred, not in a mystical sense, in a human one. They remind you that life is always happening right here. That awareness doesn't live in grand revelations. It lives in the texture of now. This shift often begins in the quiet, in the hours spent with Zen echoes, letting sound carve out space inside you. But eventually, it moves beyond the curated listening experience. It shows up when your phone rings, when the wind knocks something over, when a bird cries out in the middle of a thought. These are not interruptions. They're moments of real life breaking through. And when you've trained your ear to meet sound with presence, these intrusions become part of the music. In fact, you might begin to realize that everything has rhythm, that the day pulses, that emotion carries tone, that conversations rise and fall like melodies. When you've practiced listening deeply to one thing, you start listening more deeply to everything. Your perception becomes less filtered, your hearing more receptive, not just through your ears, but through your attention, your awareness. And it doesn't stop at sound. Once you start listening to the world, you start listening to yourself. You hear your own thoughts differently. You notice the ones that rush in with urgency. You begin to identify the tone of your inner voice, not just what it says, but how it speaks to you. Is it kind? Is it harsh? Is it patient? Does it leave space for silence? You begin to make different choices, not by force, but by tuning in. Zen echoes are not about teaching you what to hear. They're about helping you remember how to listen. And when listening becomes a way of being, it transforms your inner and outer worlds. You start catching yourself in moments that used to slip past. You hear your reaction to someone before it becomes a word. You sense the tension before it builds. This is not control, this is presence. This is what happens when you practice giving attention without demand. This growing awareness can also change how you create, how you communicate, how you respond. Artists often speak of silence as the space where something begins. Writers pause between lines. Dancers listen to breath. Even in motion, there is waiting. Even in speech, there is quiet. And when you've trained yourself to hear that space, you begin to honor it. You begin to speak more intentionally. You begin to act more meaningfully. Everyday sound begins to feel less random and more relational. You may find yourself closing a door more gently, aware of the sound it makes. You might turn down the volume of something, not because it's too loud, but because it's too crowded. You become the curator of your own environment, not out of control, but out of care. Sound, in this way, becomes not something you tolerate, but something you shape. And that awareness feeds back into everything else. It helps you rest more fully, work more clearly, love more patiently, listen more openly. The world around you doesn't have to change for this to happen. You do. Or rather, you return to a deeper version of yourself. One who has always known how to listen. One who has always been in touch with the quiet beneath the noise. Zen echoes are not just about the tones themselves. They're about training your mind, your heart, your body to meet sound, any sound, with presence, to soften your grip, to expand your attention, to experience the world not just through thought, but through vibration, through space, through rhythm. And when that becomes natural, when that becomes real, you begin to hear even silence differently. You begin to notice the way it moves, the way it breathes, the way it holds everything you thought you needed to fill. And that is the beginning of real peace. Sometimes the most meaningful changes don't look like change at all. They show up as small shifts, a new way of noticing, a different tone in your voice, a longer pause before you respond. These changes don't arrive with a dramatic flourish. They unfold quietly, gradually, like sound fading into silence or stillness returning after a wave of motion. And when we begin to weave Zen echoes into the fabric of our lives, we open the door to a gentler kind of transformation, one that's not about what we add, but what we let go of. One that clears space rather than fills it. To live in rhythm with stillness is to live differently, not in resistance to the world, but in a more conscious relationship with it. We begin to see that stillness is not the absence of life, it's the very heart of it. And when we make space for that rhythm, when we return to it through listening, presence begins to infuse everything. It changes how we engage with our environment. It changes how we relate to others. And, maybe most importantly, it changes how we relate to ourselves. There's a kind of soft resilience that comes from this practice. Not toughness, not numbness, but a quiet strength rooted in the knowledge that no matter how loud the world gets, you know where your center is. You've touched it. You've listened into it. You've built a relationship with it that can't be taken from you. Not by stress, not by distraction, not by the endless demands of daily life. This doesn't mean you won't get overwhelmed. It doesn't mean you won't feel lost or exhausted or pulled in too many directions. What it means is, even in those moments, there's a place inside you that knows how to return. Not because someone told you, not because it's written in a book, but because you've practiced it. You've lived it. You've made stillness part of your language. And what begins internally doesn't stay internal. Over time, your internal state begins to shape the external spaces you move through. The energy you carry becomes more settled, more grounded. People may not always know what's different, but they'll feel it. The way you listen, the way you pause, the way you show up fully without needing to fill the space. That's the power of presence. That's the echo of stillness living in you. There's also a kind of clarity that begins to emerge, not always with answers, but with perspective. Decisions that once felt cloudy begin to take shape more easily. You start to sense what's aligned and what isn't, not from analysis, but from intuition, from a deeper knowing, from a felt sense of what resonates and what doesn't. Because when you spend time listening deeply to sound, you begin to listen more deeply to your own life. This listening becomes your compass. It doesn't shout, it doesn't push, it whispers, it invites. And the more you trust it, the more it leads you toward simplicity, toward honesty, toward peace. You begin to notice which environments support your stillness and which ones steal from it. You notice which relationships feel like noise and which ones feel like music. You don't have to fix everything. You just start making different choices, quietly, steadily, naturally. And the beauty of it is that none of this requires perfection. You don't have to listen every day. You don't have to always be calm or centered. What matters is that you return, that you remember, that you stay in relationship with the sound, with the space, with yourself. Even after days or weeks of distance, the moment you press play, the door opens again. The stillness welcomes you back, not because you earned it, but because it was always there. This is how Zen Echoes become more than an experience. They become a companion, a reminder, a rhythm that walks with you, even when you're surrounded by noise, even when life feels messy and unpredictable. The echoes live on, not because they're constantly playing, but because they've become part of your internal landscape, a tone beneath the surface, a breath beneath the effort. So when you return to these soundscapes, whether tomorrow or a year from now, know that you're not starting over. You're continuing. You're deepening. Each listen is a thread in the larger tapestry of your own presence, and over time, the tapestry becomes rich with texture, with stillness, with the quiet kind of beauty that doesn't fade. Zen Echoes are not a path you follow. They're a space you remember. A sound that leads you not away from yourself, but directly into the center of who you've always been. There's something quietly revolutionary about choosing to slow down in a world that constantly demands speed. It goes against the grain of modern culture, against the endless push for more, faster, louder, And yet, when you allow yourself to step outside that current, just for a moment, you begin to feel the immense power of that choice. It's not about retreating from life. It's about reclaiming your relationship to it. It's about finding your own rhythm within the noise. And in that rhythm, discovering not just calm, but clarity. Not just rest, but renewal. Zen Echoes offer a doorway into that choice. They offer a way to soften the edges of your day, to loosen your grip on urgency, to feel the space between one moment and the next. And the more you walk through that doorway, the more you realize you're not leaving the world behind. You're simply arriving in it more fully. It's easy to think that stillness is something you find only in silence. But with practice, you come to see that stillness can exist within sound. That it lives not only in the absence of motion, but in the quality of your attention. You could be sitting in traffic, cooking dinner, walking through a crowded street, and still be grounded, still be listening, still be with yourself. This is one of the most empowering shifts Zen Echoes can support. The recognition that you don't need to wait for perfect conditions to feel peace. You don't need to escape your life in order to reconnect with presence. Instead, you can begin to weave it in, to bring the stillness with you, to let the tone of attention become part of how you move through the world. And this has ripple effects, not just inside you, but around you. When you operate from presence, your relationships change, not because others change, but because your way of relating shifts. You listen more deeply, you speak with more care, you create more space for yourself and for others. That space becomes a gift, an unspoken invitation for others to slow down, to soften, to show up more fully. Even conflict feels different from this place. You may still feel anger or hurt or frustration, but you hold it differently. You breathe with it. You speak from it without collapsing into it. And the reason you can do that is because you've practiced being with intensity through sound. You've felt dissonance. You've stayed with vibration. You've learned to meet discomfort not by pushing it away, but by listening to it. That's a skill. That's resilience. That's presence in action. And it doesn't end with conflict. It extends to joy too, to celebration, to beauty. The more you've trained your attention through sound, the more capable you are of receiving joy fully when it comes. You're not distracted, you're not guarded. You're open, awake, able to feel deeply because you've created the space to feel safely. This is one of the more surprising gifts of practicing with Zen Echoes, the way it expands your capacity, not just for stillness, but for life, for sensation, for meaning. You're no longer numbed by overwhelm. You're no longer lost in momentum. You're here, really here. And from that place, even ordinary things begin to feel extraordinary. You begin to notice color differently, texture, light. You might stand under a tree and actually hear the wind through the leaves, not as background, but as music. You might look into someone's eyes and feel time slow for just a second. You might laugh and actually feel your body open with the sound. These aren't dramatic events, they're glimpses of life when it's not filtered through urgency. And over time, those glimpses become more frequent. They become more familiar, until eventually, they stop being exceptions. They start becoming your norm. Not in every moment, not perfectly, but increasingly, gently, naturally. That's the transformation. That's the return. Zen Echoes are not the source of this return. You are. The sound is simply a companion, a tool, a path. What it offers is space. What it encourages is presence. What it awakens is the part of you that already knows how to be here, how to breathe, how to rest into the moment without needing to change it. And once you've touched that place, once you've heard the resonance of your own presence, you'll always know how to find your way back. No matter how loud things get, no matter how fast, stillness is not something fragile you have to protect. It's It's something strong you can carry, always. You may begin to notice a deepening relationship between sound and memory. Not the kind of memory that clings to events or clutches at details, but a softer, more sensory memory, a felt memory. You hear a certain tone and your body responds. Not with thought, but with sensation. Your breath slows. Your shoulders drop. There's no story attached. Just an immediate knowing. I've been here before. I've rested here. I've listened here. This is what safety sounds like. This is what presence feels like. That kind of memory becomes a refuge. And it's not tied to a specific time of day or a particular practice. It's embodied. It's stored in your nervous system, waiting to be reawakened. With Zen Echoes, each session strengthens that thread. Each time you let the tones wash over you. Each time you pause long enough to listen past the surface, you're reinforcing that connection between sound and stillness, between attention and peace. What's beautiful is how seamlessly this carries over into life's more chaotic moments. Say you're in the middle of a tense conversation. Something sharp has just been said. Your heart is racing. Your jaw tightens. But somewhere in the background, almost without thinking, you hear it. A remembered tone, a breath, the echo of a pause. And it's enough. Enough to interrupt the reaction. Enough to remind you that you don't have to respond from that place. You can listen first. You can return. Or you're sitting at your desk, surrounded by noise. Notifications, voices, thoughts stacked on thoughts. It's tempting to push through, to outrun the overwhelm. But instead, you remember just 3 minutes, just one sound. You put in your headphones, let the tones begin. And slowly, gently, the internal weather shifts. You haven't escaped the world. You've remembered your way back to it. This is what makes sound so powerful. It's immediacy. It's intimacy. You don't have to think your way into presence. You just have to hear, to feel. And as you keep returning to this practice, your threshold for stillness rises. What once felt foreign begins to feel familiar. What once seemed elusive becomes a place you can visit anytime, anywhere. And the more familiar this state becomes, the more it informs your decisions. You start choosing differently, not from fear, not from habit, but from alignment, from groundedness. You start noticing which environments support your rhythm and which ones disturb it. You create boundaries not as walls, but as invitations to clarity, to coherence, to peace. Even the way you move through space changes. You begin to value slowness, not as laziness, but as intentionality. You walk more mindfully. You eat more consciously. You take in the world around you with a different kind of gaze. Not scanning, not judging, just witnessing, just being. It's not that life stops challenging you. The challenges will come, but your relationship to them shifts. You don't get pulled under as easily. You don't react as quickly. You've trained a new kind of response, one rooted in awareness, in presence, in the deep hum of your own inner clarity. And this clarity is not rigid. It doesn't make you cold or distant, quite the opposite. It softens you. It allows you to be more open, more compassionate, more receptive, because you're no longer bracing yourself against the world. You're meeting it with open ears, with a steady breath, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows where to find stillness, no matter what. And slowly, others notice, not because you're preaching stillness, but because you're embodying it. In the way you sit, the way you speak, the way you let silence have its place in conversation. People feel it, even if they can't name it. And sometimes, without even meaning to, you give them permission to slow down too. This is the quiet reach of practice, the ripple effect of returning to sound, again and again. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, being human, being here. You might think of it like a tuning fork. Every time you listen, you realign. You clear the noise not by force, but by resonance. And the more you tune in, the more natural it feels. Until one day, without even realizing it, You become the tone. You become the stillness. You become the echo that helps others return to themselves. You might not always realize when it's happening, but slowly, steadily, the practice of listening begins to shape the structure of your days. What once felt like scattered moments of quiet begin to connect, like stepping stones across the current of daily life. They give you footing. They give you rhythm, not a rigid schedule, but a gentle cadence that moves with you. This rhythm isn't imposed. It's discovered, built over time through repetition, through presence, through the simple, powerful act of tuning in. And in this rhythm, something else begins to emerge, a trust, not just in the sound, not even in the process, but in yourself. You begin to trust that you can return, that you can hold space for your own experience, no matter what it contains. You trust that stillness isn't something that disappears when life gets hard. It's something that can carry you through it. It's in this way that Zen echoes become more than an auditory practice. They become a way of living, a way of being in relationship with time, with space, with breath. You start to sense when you've gone too long without pause. You start to feel the ache of disconnection, not as a problem to solve, but as an invitation to return. And when you do return, the sound meets you right where you are. No judgment, no expectation, just resonance, just presence. There may be days when it feels difficult, when the world is loud, when your mind won't settle, when everything inside you feels restless. These are not signs of failure. These are openings, opportunities to deepen your practice, to remember that you don't listen because you feel calm. You listen to remember that calm is still possible. You don't wait for perfect conditions. You make space in the middle of the mess, and sometimes that space looks like just one breath, one tone, one moment of recognizing, I'm here, I'm listening. Even when you don't feel ready, even when your thoughts are racing, you show up, you sit down, you press play, and in doing so, you reconnect, not only with the sound, but with your own capacity to stay. Over time, this builds resilience, not the hard, armored kind, but the soft, steady kind that lives in your nervous system, that says, I can be with this. I don't have to run, I don't have to fix. I can breathe, I can listen. I can let this moment unfold without rushing to the next. And as this trust grows, so does your sensitivity. You begin to notice more, internally and externally. You sense when something is out of tune, when a situation doesn't resonate, when your energy feels off. And instead of pushing through or numbing out, you pause, you listen. You return to the sound, not for escape, but for realignment. This is the kind of listening that changes how you live. You become less reactive, more attuned, more capable of choosing your response instead of being driven by habit or fear. You speak with more clarity. You rest with more ease. You move through your days with the quiet strength of someone who knows how to access their own center. That center doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be seen or understood by anyone else. It just needs to be felt by you. It needs to be trusted. And it will be, the more you listen, the more you return, the more you recognize that stillness is not a rare state to chase, but a baseline to reconnect with, again and again. Zen echoes are the bridge, the tool, the tone that helps you remember the way back. They don't hold the answers. They don't provide a formula, but they do offer a path, one that doesn't lead you away from life, but deeper into it, into the richness of experience, into the fullness of your breath, into the quiet miracle of now. And when you walk that path long enough, you begin to see that stillness was never separate from you. It was always waiting, always present, just beneath the surface, just behind the noise. There's a moment in the practice of listening where sound begins to blur into sensation. It's no longer something you hear. It becomes something you feel, a vibration in your chest, a warmth in your hands, a loosening around the eyes or shoulders. These aren't dramatic shifts. They don't announce themselves with fanfare, but they matter because they signal something subtle and essential. Your body is responding. Your nervous system is listening. And in that listening, something softens. Something lets go. This is the kind of healing that doesn't ask for explanation. It doesn't need to be understood intellectually. It simply unfolds, moment by moment, tone by tone. And as it does, you begin to notice that your body carries stories, not in words but in tension, in breath, in the quiet holding of emotion that never had a place to land. With Zen Echoes, those stories aren't forced open, they're invited, patiently, through presence, through resonance, through a kind of listening that doesn't try to fix, but simply stays. This kind of healing space is rare, not because it's hard to create, but because we rarely give ourselves permission to dwell in it. We move quickly, we distract, we manage, but deep down, there's a part of us that longs for pause, for the kind of presence that doesn't rush, doesn't judge, doesn't demand. Zen Echoes meet that part of us. They offer a tone that says you're safe. You don't have to hold it all right now. You can rest, you can feel, you can release. Sometimes that release comes in quiet waves, a deeper exhale, a sense of being more here than you've been in a while. Other times, it's more subtle, a gentle shift in how you carry your body, how you hold your thoughts. These moments may seem small, but they are significant because they represent a new way of relating to yourself, a way rooted in trust, in compassion, in spacious awareness. As you continue this practice, you may also notice the way it changes your relationship with silence. What once felt empty or uncomfortable begins to feel full. Not with noise, but with presence, with awareness, with the subtle hum of being. Silence becomes less something to fill and more something to enter. And in that entry, you find yourself, not the version of you shaped by roles or expectations, but the one who simply is, the one who breathes, the one who listens, the one who knows. From this space, clarity often arises, not forced but revealed. You begin to sense what you've been avoiding. You begin to see what you truly value. You begin to notice where your energy flows most freely and where it feels stuck. These aren't always easy truths, but they are true. And when met with compassion, they don't overwhelm, they empower. That empowerment isn't about control, it's about presence, about choice, about the quiet, confident knowing that you can return to yourself again and again, no matter the noise around you. And that return doesn't always look like stillness. Sometimes it looks like movement, like creativity, like laughter, like weeping. Stillness isn't the absence of life, it's the awareness within it, the steadiness that allows everything else to flow. And as this awareness deepens, so does your capacity to hold space for others. You listen more fully, you react less quickly. You become a calm presence, not because you've eliminated your own emotion, but because you've learned to stay with it, to breathe through it, to listen beyond it. That skill, that way of being, becomes a gift to those around you. A kind of silent leadership that doesn't seek attention but creates connection. It's important to remember that this path isn't linear. There will be days of deep rest and days of resistance. Times when the sound feels like home and times when it feels far away. This is not failure, this is practice, this is life. And every return is part of the rhythm, every pause, part of the music. Zen Echoes are not an escape, they are an invitation to slow down, to feel, to notice, to listen. Not just to the tones, but to yourself, to the world, to the quiet unfolding of your own being. And in that listening, to find not answers, but a deeper kind of presence, a presence that stays. There are sounds we encounter in everyday life that seem so ordinary we forget they're even there. The soft whir of a fan, the muted hum of distant traffic, the creak of floorboards beneath steady feet. These aren't sounds we seek out, and yet, When we begin to practice listening with openness, they reveal something unexpected. They remind us that the world is always speaking, always moving, always offering a rhythm. If we choose to tune in, Zen Echoes help to train this sensitivity, not by demanding it, but by nurturing it. Over time, what begins as passive hearing becomes active listening, and not just to curated tones or ambient compositions, but to life itself. You begin to notice the emotional cadence in a conversation, the hesitation before someone answers, the quiet relief in a sigh. You notice the spaces between words, the weight of silence when something meaningful has just been said. Sound becomes a language, and you're no longer skimming. You're reading every syllable with care. This deeper listening doesn't just enrich your perception of others, it brings you closer to your own experience. You start to detect subtle shifts in your energy. You recognize the early signs of tension building in your body. You sense when you're closing off emotionally or when you're grounded and receptive. These insights don't come through analysis, they come through presence, through sound, through attention gently anchored in the moment. And this awareness extends even further. It changes how you move, how you touch, how you engage with the world. The sharp clang of a dish suddenly feels intrusive. The soft click of a door closing feels intentional. You may begin to move more quietly, not to disappear, but because you're aware of your impact. You're aware that sound carries energy, that every action has tone, that every choice leaves a kind of auditory footprint. This isn't about perfection, it's about connection, about tuning into the pulse of your surroundings so that your presence feels in harmony with it. You begin to notice when something feels jarring, and instead of bracing against it, you ask why. Why does this moment feel off? What part of me is not in rhythm here? And without rushing to fix it, you listen. You adjust, you soften. That softening becomes a powerful habit. In a world that often values volume, sharpness, urgency, this is radical. To pause, to breathe, to choose your tone. Whether you're speaking to a stranger, writing a message, or simply sitting with yourself in the quiet, you're no longer reacting from noise. You're responding from resonance. Zen Echoes serve as a tuning fork for this way of life. Every time you listen, you're reminded of what it feels like to be in tune. And the more you experience that state, the more you recognize when you're out of it. You catch yourself sooner. You recover more quickly. You don't cling to stillness as a perfect state, but you hold it as a reference point, as a home frequency that you can return to again and again. And maybe most remarkably, this tuning doesn't require hours of practice. Sometimes it only takes a few minutes, a few tones, a few conscious breaths with your full attention present. Those small resets have a cumulative effect, like drops of water filling a bowl. Over time, they build a reservoir of steadiness inside you. This reservoir is what allows you to stay anchored in difficult conversations, to remain present when someone you care about is struggling, to not run from discomfort, but to listen through it, not to fix, not to escape, but to remain. That is the real gift, the ability to stay with what is, to let sound carry you through, not to distraction, but to deeper presence. And this presence doesn't make life easier, but it does make it clearer. You see more, feel more, understand more. You don't just hear someone's words, you hear their need beneath them. You hear your own needs more clearly too. You're no longer waiting for the world to quiet down so you can find peace. You're learning to carry peace with you, in your breath, in your tone, in the quiet steadiness of your own listening. That's the real transformation Zen Echoes offer. Not a momentary escape, but a lasting shift. A change in how you listen, how you show up, how you live. When you start to relate to the world through the lens of sound and stillness, your experience of time begins to shift. It no longer feels like something chasing you. It becomes something you can breathe into. something you can stretch, even within the constraints of a schedule. You stop asking how much time you have, and instead begin asking how deeply you can enter the moment you're in. Whether you're sitting for a longer session or catching a brief pause between tasks, your presence becomes the measure, not the clock. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds gradually as your nervous system learns to trust spaciousness again, to trust that not every second needs to be filled. That worth isn't measured in productivity. That sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is nothing at all, except listen, soften, and return. And in this space, your creativity wakes up. Not just artistic creativity, but life creativity. The kind that lets you reimagine your routines. The kind that allows you to problem solve without spiraling. The kind that comes from stillness, not from striving. It's a subtle but profound reorientation, from doing to being, from effort to flow. This is not about passivity, it's about clarity. When you move from presence, your actions become more aligned. You're not reacting blindly, you're responding intentionally. You know when to step in and when to step back. You know when to speak and when to stay quiet. You're not ruled by urgency, you're guided by rhythm. And this rhythm, while deeply personal, begins to ripple outward. It influences your home, your workplace, your relationships. You may find that conversations take on a different tone. They become more grounded, less hurried, more honest. People respond not just to your words, but to the quality of your presence, to the feeling that you're actually here, with them, with yourself, with this moment. That feeling is rare. It's sacred, and it doesn't require perfection. You can still stumble, still feel restless, still get swept away in the chaos of the day. But with Zen Echoes, you have a way back, a tone, a breath, a memory of stillness waiting to be rekindled. Sometimes the return is simple. You pause between meetings, take 3 conscious breaths, and recall the resonance of a favorite tone. Sometimes it's more deliberate, a full session in the quiet of the evening, letting the sound guide you out of your thoughts and back into your body. And sometimes the return is just a feeling, a sudden sense of grounding while walking, or washing your hands, or looking at the sky. These moments don't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Their power lies in their frequency, in their cumulative presence throughout your day, each one a quiet turning inward, each one a small act of remembrance. And over time, you begin to realize that stillness was never a destination. It's a way of relating, a way of seeing, a way of listening, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. You carry it into how you cook, how you work, how you listen to someone's story. It becomes part of how you exist in the world. Zen Echoes support this shift by giving you a language for it. Not a language of words, but of tone, texture, pattern, space. The kind of language that bypasses the mind and speaks directly to the heart, to the breath, to the bones. You don't have to interpret it. You just have to feel it. Let it resonate. Let it guide you. And the beauty of this guidance is that it's gentle. It doesn't demand. It doesn't rush. It doesn't ask you to be different than you are. It meets you exactly where you are and invites you gently to go deeper, to soften, to open, to be. This invitation is always available, always waiting. Whether you're on day 1 or year 10 of your practice, the sound doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. It grows, it deepens, it becomes more personal, more intimate, more yours. That's what makes it powerful. Not that it changes the world around you, but that it changes how you meet it, with more steadiness, more breath, more listening, more life. You may begin to sense that this way of listening, the still, open kind, is not confined to your dedicated practice time. It starts to thread itself into your ordinary moments. When you're standing in line, driving with the windows down, folding laundry or sipping tea, these moments, so often dismissed as mundane, become doorways, invitations to return. You don't need ideal conditions. You don't need silence. You just need willingness, attention, a breath. That's the quiet beauty of this approach. It's inclusive. It meets you where you are. Whether you're in a quiet room with headphones on or walking through a noisy city street, you can choose to listen differently. You can shift from control to curiosity, from resistance to receptivity, from noise to nuance. And as this quality of attention deepens, your experience of the world becomes more textured. You hear more, you feel more. You begin to notice the difference between background noise and living sound. A rustling leaf isn't just wind, it's a rhythm, a gesture. Footsteps aren't interruptions, they're punctuation. The rhythm of the world becomes something you're part of, not something you're bracing against. This shift matters. It turns your environment into an ally, not because it becomes quiet, but because you become tuned. You find the calm beneath the chaos, the signal inside the static, and you start to realize that peace doesn't always mean absence. It often means presence. A full, rich, clear engagement with whatever is here. You become more discerning, not in a rigid way, but in a subtle, intuitive one. You know when a sound supports you, and when it distracts. You recognize what kinds of environments nourish your nervous system. You begin to make different choices, not out of guilt or pressure, but out of resonance, out of a desire to stay close to what's real. And in this closeness, you begin to develop a kind of inner clarity that guides you. It's not loud, it's not always rational, but it's steady. It shows up as a quiet yes or no, a gentle leaning in or pulling away. It's the kind of clarity that can't be forced, only listened to. And the more you trust it, the stronger it becomes. You might find that you don't need as much stimulation as you once thought. That quiet no longer feels empty, but alive. That doing less allows you to feel more. Not more drama, but more truth, more subtlety. Life begins to feel layered, not heavy, but dimensional. And you begin to understand that presence isn't a state you achieve. It's a state you return to, over and over again. Zen echoes are your guide in that return. They don't shout, they don't pull, they offer, they invite, and in accepting that invitation, you give yourself a gift of pause, of reflection, of reconnection. You don't have to escape your life to feel peace. You can find peace right in the middle of it, in the way you breathe, in the way you listen, in the way you let sound remind you of what's already within you. And what's within you is not something you have to earn. It's not something you need to be worthy of. It's there by nature, like a calm pool beneath a rushing stream. It doesn't disappear when the surface gets stirred. It waits quietly, steadily, and with each practice, you get better at reaching it. This kind of inner access changes how you hold your emotions. You don't push them away or try to solve them immediately. You listen, you breathe, you stay, even with the uncomfortable ones, especially with those. And in staying, you learn that feelings are not problems. They're signals. They want to be acknowledged, not fixed, heard, not silenced. That's the heart of this work. Not to become empty of feeling, but full of presence, to become a witness, a companion to your own experience, not judging, not rushing, just being with. And in this being with, you find room, space, grace. Not every moment will feel profound, but every moment is an opportunity to return. And that return is everything. What begins as a simple listening practice often becomes something deeper, an invitation to rewrite your relationship with your inner world. With Zen Echoes, you start by noticing sound, but gradually you begin to notice self. The patterns of tension that tighten your shoulders, the inner commentary that hums in the background, the subtle stories that shape your reactions. And with that awareness comes possibility, because once you notice, you can choose. You can pause, you can soften. And in that pause, you begin to experience something rare and powerful: neutrality, a space where things simply are. where your feelings don't have to be labeled good or bad, where your thoughts don't have to be judged or believed, where you can let go of the need to fix and just feel instead. That space, quiet, open, steady, becomes a refuge, a place to land, a place that welcomes every part of you, even the restless, even the unsure. In daily life, that refuge becomes more and more accessible. You don't need to retreat into silence to find peace. You just need to remember. And Zen Echoes help you remember. They create an anchor in sound that holds you steady while the rest of the world continues to move. You still engage with life. You still feel the full range of human emotion. But underneath it all, there's a thread of calm you've learned to follow. This inner thread can be especially important in moments of stress or overwhelm. Instead of being pulled under by emotion, you reach for the tone. You recall the sensation of resonance. You breathe into the quiet, and slowly you return to center. Not perfectly, not instantly, but with a kind of grace that builds over time. You start to trust your ability to recover. You start to believe in your capacity to hold complexity without collapsing under it. That belief, quiet and steady, transforms the way you meet your life. You don't avoid difficulty, you approach it with presence. You don't need everything to be calm to feel calm. You carry calm with you, in your breath, in your posture, in your listening. Others feel this shift, even if they can't name it. They feel your steadiness, your ease, your attunement. And without even trying, you begin to influence the space around you. You become a kind of tuning fork yourself, resonating presence, drawing others toward balance simply by being grounded in your own. This is not about being perfect. It's about being real, being available to life as it unfolds, and being willing to meet that life not with resistance, but with attention, with curiosity, with care. Zen Echoes train you in this gently and consistently, each time you return to the sound. And returning is the key, not once, not occasionally, but regularly, as a rhythm, as a ritual, as a way of honoring your own nervous system, your own energy, your own being. You're not chasing transformation, you're tending to it, watering it like a plant, sitting beside it like a friend, letting it grow in its own time. Some days that growth will feel like insight, other days it will feel like stillness, and some days it will feel like nothing at all. But even in those quiet, unremarkable moments, the practice is working. The listening is shaping you. The tones are settling into your system like stones into a riverbed, gradually creating a new foundation, a new flow. And the more you trust that process, the more sustainable your peace becomes. It's not something that can be shaken by a single disruption. It's not dependent on everything going well. It's rooted, integrated, yours. So you keep coming back, not out of discipline, but out of devotion, out of love for the part of you that knows how to pause, how to listen, how to simply be. You return because you remember how it feels to be held by sound, because you've learned that rest isn't something you earn, it's something you allow. And in allowing, you reconnect with your breath, with your body, with the rhythm of your life as it is, not as it should be, not as it might be someday, but as it is right now. There's a beauty in repetition that we often overlook. We tend to seek the new, the novel, the next experience just around the bend, but with sound, especially sound designed for stillness, it's the repetition that reveals. The steady return to the same tone, the same interval, the same space between notes. This is where the depth lies. It's like the ocean's waves, each one familiar, yet each one different. And in that sameness, a rhythm takes root in you. A rhythm that doesn't demand attention, but draws it gently. A rhythm that doesn't push you forward, but allows you to settle where you are. This kind of settling has its own intelligence. It shows you what you've been carrying without knowing it. The tension in your jaw, the clench in your belly, the thoughts looping without rest. And it doesn't confront you. It simply invites you to notice, to soften, to listen beneath the noise. At first, you might find that your mind resists this quiet. It wants stimulation, distraction, movement. It wants to solve, to sort, to do. But the echoes don't respond to that urgency. They don't speed up. They don't adapt to your anxious pace. They remain slow, intentional, grounded. And in time, you begin to match them. Not because you force yourself to, but because it feels good, because it feels safe, because it feels like coming home. Home, in this sense, is not a place, it's a state, a tone of being, a way of relating to yourself that says you are enough. You don't need to perform, you don't need to improve, you can just be here, now. That kind of message, repeated not with words but with sound, creates a deep imprint. It goes past the logical mind and lands in the body, in the breath, in the space behind the eyes. It becomes part of your nervous system, a new baseline, a recalibration, and once you've felt it, even once, you know the way back. It may surprise you how simple the way back is. A breath, a tone, a few quiet minutes with your eyes closed. The world doesn't have to stop. You don't have to pause your responsibilities. You only need to reorient your attention, to return to listening. And listening, in this context, is more than hearing. It's sensing, receiving, opening. It's an act of intimacy with the present moment. A way of saying yes to what is, without needing to label it or fix it or change it. From that yes, spaciousness arises. Not the kind that creates distance, but the kind that creates room. Room for emotion, for sensation, for awareness. You begin to hold more, but not carry more. You become less reactive, not because you're suppressing anything, but because you're anchored. You're in rhythm. You're listening. And through this listening, compassion grows. Not just for others, but for yourself. For the part of you that forgets, that rushes, that resists. You don't judge it. You hold it. You welcome it back again and again with the same patience the tones offer you. That's one of the greatest lessons Zen Echoes can teach. Gentleness is powerful. Slowness is not a flaw. Repetition is not stagnation, it's depth. The same sound, heard again and again, becomes a mirror, a friend, a guide. And so you return, not because you must, but because you want to. Because something in you has tasted the quiet and wants more. Something in you has remembered what it feels like to be held without expectation, to be quiet without shame, to be still without fear. This is where real rest begins. Not just physical rest, but emotional rest, mental rest, existential rest. The kind that doesn't come from escaping life, but from meeting it fully, honestly, gently. The kind that allows you to show up again with more clarity, more calm, more heart. One of the most surprising aspects of deep listening is how it gradually teaches you about boundaries, not as walls, but as contours, as edges of self. You begin to feel the difference between what is yours to hold and what belongs to someone else. Not because you're closing off, but because you're tuning in. The more clearly you hear yourself, the less likely you are to take on what doesn't belong to you. This awareness isn't cold. It's not distant. It's compassionate, steady, rooted in care for both yourself and others. Boundaries like these are often difficult to define intellectually, but sound teaches them through feeling. When a tone is too loud or too sharp, your body reacts. When it's soft and even, you soften with it. Your nervous system responds long before your mind has named the sensation. Over time, you begin to trust those responses. You stop second-guessing your instincts. You let your inner resonance guide you. This is not about becoming rigid or inflexible. In fact, it's the opposite. When you're attuned, you become more adaptable, more responsive rather than reactive. You sense what's needed in each moment, whether it's space, presence, action, or stillness. You start to navigate your life not just with logic or planning, but with deep listening as your compass. This kind of navigation is especially helpful in relationships. Whether with a partner, a friend, a colleague, or a family member, you become more aware of what's happening beneath the surface. You hear not only what is said, but how it is said. You pick up on the shifts in tone, the pauses, the emotional undercurrents, and you respond not with scripts, but with presence, with a felt sense of care and understanding. That presence changes the quality of your interactions. It invites authenticity. It makes space for vulnerability. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. They feel that they are being heard, not just their words, but their being. And when that kind of listening is mutual, a new kind of connection emerges, one rooted not in performance or expectation, but in resonance. You may also begin to notice that some connections shift as you deepen this practice. Some relationships feel more nourishing, others more draining. Some environments feel more spacious, others more noisy. And again, the sound helps you notice, not by telling you what to do, but by helping you feel what's true. That truth can be subtle. It doesn't always announce itself. It arrives gently, like a tone at the edge of hearing. And the more you listen, the more clearly it speaks. You may find yourself making small changes, noticing what helps you stay regulated, choosing where to put your attention, adjusting how you spend your time. These changes aren't driven by force. They emerge naturally as extensions of your listening. And the listening itself becomes something you crave, not just because it brings peace, but because it brings clarity. It simplifies. It helps you let go of what doesn't serve. It teaches you to trust the spaces between words, between actions, between thoughts. You come to realize that those spaces are not empty. They are full of possibility, full of presence. They are the place where intuition lives, where creativity stirs, where healing begins. And as you spend more time in them, you no longer fear them. You begin to welcome them. You begin to make space for them in how you speak, how you move, how you think. The result is a life that feels less cluttered, not necessarily quieter in a literal sense, but clearer, more intentional. You feel less pulled in every direction, less fragmented, more whole. And this wholeness is not about being complete or fixed. It's about being integrated, about allowing all parts of you, your joy, your fear, your tenderness, your strength, to exist in relationship with each other, to harmonize. That harmony isn't perfect, it wavers, it shifts, but it remains your orientation, your north. And the sound, the steady, familiar, gentle sound, is your reminder, your return. The relationship between your attention and your environment is often more intimate than you think. Every space you inhabit, physical, mental, emotional, has its own resonance, its own vibration. Sometimes you don't even realize how deeply those spaces affect you until you step into a new one. Maybe it's the hush of a library, the calm of a warm bath, the quiet hum of early morning before the world wakes. These spaces offer not just stillness, but sanctuary, and over time, with practice, you learn how to bring that sanctuary with you. Zen echoes are like those spaces, portable sanctuaries. Their tones don't fight with your surroundings. They weave through them, settle under them, soften their edges. They work not by overpowering your thoughts, but by making room around them. Room for something different, something slower, something deeper. In this way, sound becomes a kind of architecture, one not made of walls and windows, but of intention and vibration. Just as a well-designed space can influence how you feel, so too can a well-designed soundscape. And what's beautiful about this kind of architecture is that you're not just a visitor in it. You're part of its structure. Your breath, your posture, your attention, they interact with the tones, complete the space, give it form. So, when you sit with Zen Echoes, you're not just listening passively. You're participating. You're shaping your inner room. With each return to the tone, you're reinforcing the boundaries of peace within you. And over time, that inner room becomes easier to find, easier to enter, easier to dwell in. This inner room isn't always silent. In fact, it rarely is, but it's clear, it's stable, and it gives you the space to feel what's true. That might be grief, it might be joy, it might be the quiet ache of longing, or the simple relief of stillness. Whatever it is, it's welcome. Nothing needs to be edited out or polished over. The room holds it all, and the more you trust this space, the more you begin to trust yourself. You stop needing external validation for your inner experience. You don't rush to explain your feelings or justify your reactions. You just meet them with presence, with kindness, with breath. That self-trust becomes one of the most powerful outcomes of your listening. It grows slowly like a tree, rooted in attention, watered by repetition, reaching outward, but grounded inward. And like any living thing, it needs tending. Not perfectly, just regularly, with care. And what you tend begins to flourish. Your clarity sharpens, your reactions soften, your decisions align more closely with your values. You start to sense when something resonates and when it doesn't, not because someone tells you, but because you feel it. Your body becomes an instrument, and your awareness, the tuner. That's when you know the practice is living in you, not just as an idea, but as a rhythm, as a way of being. And others notice it too. They may not know what's changed, but they feel it. The steadiness in your voice, the calm in your presence, the way you listen, not just to them, but to the space between you. You become, in a way, a quiet invitation to slowness, to depth, to presence, just like the sounds that have been guiding you. And that's the quiet paradox of this whole journey. The very practice that begins in stillness doesn't end in stillness. It extends outward, into your conversations, your choices, your relationships, your art, your work. It becomes action, not frantic or forced, but intentional, informed by listening. This is not about withdrawing from life. It's about engaging with it more fully, more honestly, with less noise and more resonance, with fewer assumptions and more curiosity, with less performance and more presence. And the sound, it's still there, always ready, always waiting, not as a crutch, but as a companion, a thread that connects you to your own rhythm, a gentle reminder of the inner room you've built and the home you carry inside. There are moments, often unexpected, when the depth of your practice reveals itself. You might be in a crowded room, or caught in a tense conversation, or simply navigating the details of an ordinary day. And suddenly you feel it, not as a thought, but as a sensation, a kind of settling, a remembering, a quiet pulse of calm beneath the surface. You didn't plan it, you didn't even seek it. It was just there waiting, like a familiar tone that had never really left. This is the true gift of repetition and return. The practice becomes part of you. It threads itself through your movements, your choices, your responses. It's not something you turn on or off. It's something you carry, like a subtle current of warmth running through your body. It steadies you without effort. It holds you even as you move. You may notice that you're more attuned to transition points, the pauses between events, the spaces between thoughts, the breath before you speak. These interstitial moments, once rushed past, now feel meaningful, like small doorways into presence. You begin to honor them, to use them. A single breath becomes a way home. A moment of silence becomes an invitation to return, not just to sound, but to self. And through this continual returning, your life begins to shift. Not in dramatic ways, necessarily, but in subtle, steady ones. The way you move through your morning, the way you greet a stranger, the way you listen not just to others, but to your own inner cues. There's less friction, less noise, more flow. This flow isn't passive. It's alive. It moves with intelligence, with clarity, with compassion. And you trust it. Not because you've been told to, but because you've felt it. Again and again. In the space of stillness, in the simplicity of tone, in the echo that settles deep into your body, You may find yourself needing fewer words, needing less explanation. Not because you know everything, but because you're more comfortable in the unknown, more willing to sit with questions, more able to rest in what is, without rushing to fix or define. And that resting doesn't mean withdrawal. It means anchoring, grounding, returning again and again to the rhythm, to the breath, to the sound. Sometimes this process is quiet. Other times it stirs emotion. Old memories may rise. Long-held feelings may surface. This is part of the unfolding. Not a distraction from the practice, but an expression of it. You don't need to force insight. You don't need to chase transformation. You just need to stay with the sound. Let it do what it does. Let it echo through the body, through the story, through the heart. And in that echo, you may hear something new. A softness where there was once resistance. A tenderness where there was once tightness. A clarity that doesn't feel like certainty, but like spaciousness. Like room to breathe, like room to be. This is how healing happens, quietly, gradually, through presence, not pressure, through invitation, not demand, through returning, not escaping. And so, the tones become more than sound. They become a language your body understands, a rhythm your heart trusts, a home your spirit recognizes. You no longer need to ask if it's working. You feel it, in your body, in your breath, in the way you move through the world. And in this way, the practice continues, not as something separate from your life, but as part of it, woven into the fabric of your day, as steady as breath, as real as touch, as vital as stillness. There's a kind of peace that only reveals itself over time. It doesn't arrive all at once, and it doesn't always announce itself. Often, it settles in quietly, gently permeating your thoughts, relaxing the tight corners of your body, softening the patterns you've carried for years. It's not a sudden revelation. It's a gradual unfolding, a slow remembering of something that was always there, underneath the noise. You might notice it in small, almost unremarkable moments. The way you pause before replying to a message. The ease with which you allow yourself to take a break. The way your breath deepens without instruction. These aren't things you force. They happen because you've been listening. Because your nervous system has begun to trust stillness. Because your body has learned that rest is safe. In a world that glorifies urgency, that kind of peace is revolutionary. It's not passive. It's not indifferent. It's powerful because it allows you to respond rather than react, to discern rather than defend, to engage with the world from a grounded place, not from fear, but from presence. This presence changes how you relate to time. You stop racing through your day like there's always something more to chase. Instead, you begin to orient yourself to what's here now. You bring your full self to each moment, not because you're trying to be mindful, because it feels natural, because you've made a habit of returning, and in returning you become more yourself, less shaped by external expectations, less pushed around by noise. You start to live in alignment with your values, your body, your truth, even when things are messy. Even when you feel unsure. That alignment is not perfection. It's not about getting everything right. It's about integrity, coherence. A felt sense that your inner and outer worlds are in conversation with each other. That what you say matches what you feel. That what you do reflects what you believe. And when that alignment wavers, which it inevitably will, you have a way back. You have your breath. You have the sound. You have the practice, not as a task or an obligation, but as a companion, a steady rhythm that never asks more of you than presence. Presence, as you've learned, is enough. It's more than enough. It's powerful because it reveals what's real. It dissolves illusion. It untangles confusion. It brings clarity even in the midst of chaos. You don't need to escape the world to find peace. You simply need to return to yourself, again and again, with patience, with kindness, with attention. And each time you return, it gets a little easier. The path grows more familiar, the sound more resonant, the silence more welcoming. And what was once unfamiliar becomes a homecoming, a sanctuary that lives not in a place but in you. You begin to see that nothing was ever missing, that rest was always available, that wisdom was always within reach. That healing doesn't mean fixing, it means listening, making space, allowing what is true to emerge in its own time. And the sound, the steady echo, is your reminder, your anchor, your guide back to this truth. So you keep listening, you keep returning, and with each return you reclaim a little more of yourself, not the polished version, but the real one, the tender, complex, whole human being you've always been. With time, the sound becomes more than a background. It becomes a friend. Not in a sentimental way, but in a deeply grounding one. A presence you can count on. Something steady when life feels uncertain. Something familiar when your thoughts are scattered. You might find yourself turning to it instinctively, not just in moments of stress, but in everyday transitions, before sleep, after waking, in the quiet space between one thing and the next. And it welcomes you without needing anything from you. There's no expectation, no performance, just an invitation to return, to listen, to be. That kind of unconditional welcome is rare. In a world full of noise and demand, it's easy to forget what it feels like to just be, to exist without needing to improve, impress, or explain. But when you're held in that space, something inside you begins to relax. A deep tension you didn't even know you were carrying starts to release. You remember that you don't have to earn peace, you simply allow it. And with that allowing comes softness, not weakness, but tenderness. A strength that comes from being in tune with yourself, from knowing your own rhythms, from trusting your inner compass more than the latest trend, the loudest voice, or the pressure to be anything other than what you are. You carry this tenderness with you, not as a shield, but as a lens. It changes how you see others. You notice more, you listen more deeply, you recognize the unsaid, you feel the stories behind the words, and in doing so, you become someone who offers space, real, resonant, respectful space. This kind of presence doesn't require expertise. It requires openness, willingness, humility, a commitment to keep showing up, to the sound, to yourself, to each moment as it comes. And not every moment will feel clear. There will still be noise, still be restlessness. But the difference is, now you have a way through it. You don't feel trapped inside your thoughts or lost in the swirl of emotion. You know how to pause, how to anchor, how to listen for what's underneath. And the sound helps. It doesn't solve your problems, but it creates a space where your nervous system can settle enough to meet them. It creates a pocket of stillness where clarity can surface, even if only in glimpses. And often, those glimpses are enough. They're enough to remind you that you're okay, that you're not broken, that you're already whole, even in the mess, that you don't need to be more or less, just present, just here. That presence becomes a practice, and that practice becomes a way of life. You begin to organize your days around what nourishes rather than what depletes. You begin to make choices that align with what feels resonant rather than what feels urgent. You begin to let go, not with effort, but with ease. Ease, too, becomes a teacher. It shows you that peace isn't the absence of difficulty, it's the presence of trust. The kind of trust that says, I can meet this, I can hold this, I can breathe through this. And sometimes that breath is all you need. One steady inhale, one soft exhale, one return to the sound that reminds you who you are. This is not about isolation. It's not about retreating from life. It's about meeting life more honestly, more gently, more fully, with your heart open and your ears attuned to the world, to the moment, to the music that is always playing beneath the noise. As your awareness deepens, you begin to notice the patterns, those subtle loops your mind moves through. the habitual thoughts, the automatic responses, the unconscious tension that shows up in your shoulders, your jaw, your breath. It's not a problem, it's simply a map, a reflection of where you've been, what you've carried, and how you've learned to stay safe in the world. And with this noticing comes choice. The choice to keep reacting or to respond with presence. And that choice, small as it may seem, is powerful. It changes the shape of your day. It shifts your relationship to discomfort. It allows space between stimulus and response. Space where you can feel, breathe, observe. Where you can make room for something different. The sound helps anchor you in that space. It's not trying to lead you anywhere. It doesn't demand change. It just holds steady. A neutral presence, always available, always kind. And in that steadiness, your nervous system finds rest. Your body lets go, even just a little. Your mind softens its grip. This softening isn't laziness. It's clarity. It allows you to discern what truly matters. To prioritize based on alignment, not urgency. To let go of what's no longer yours to carry. To create space not only for stillness, but for joy, for curiosity, for quiet delight. You begin to live from this clarity, not in a dramatic, all-at-once kind of way, but gradually. With each return to sound, you deepen your trust in your own rhythm. You start saying yes to what supports you and no to what doesn't. You stop measuring your worth by productivity. You find value in rest, in listening, in being. And life, in response, begins to meet you differently. Conversations shift, opportunities arise. You feel less scattered, more rooted, less reactive, more intentional. The world doesn't necessarily change, but the way you move through it does. And that movement becomes more fluid, less forced, more alive. You're not rushing to arrive anywhere because you're already here. You're not grasping for peace because it's already within you, accessible, familiar, yours. Even in difficult moments, especially in difficult moments, you now have a way to return, to breathe, to settle, to remember what's true. The sound is there. The rhythm is there. Your practice is there, not as an escape, but as a bridge between chaos and calm, between reaction and response, between fear and trust. And this trust grows, slowly, steadily, each breath reinforcing the message: I am here, I am safe, I am whole. It's a quiet kind of confidence, not loud, not boastful, but deeply rooted. You begin to rely on it, not in a rigid way, but in a way that feels like coming home, again and again. And as you come home to yourself, you make it easier for others to do the same. Your presence becomes a signal, a subtle permission, a reminder that it's okay to slow down, to feel, to be. You won't always feel centered. That's part of being human. But now, even in disconnection, you know the way back. You know how to listen, how to breathe, how to allow. And that knowing, that embodied, lived knowing, is the heart of this journey. Not something to perform or perfect, something to live. Moment by moment, breath by breath, echo by echo. There's a deep intelligence that lives in the quiet. It doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't try to convince you. It simply waits. Calm, patient, steady. And when you slow down enough to meet it, when you really listen, it speaks. Not in words, but in feeling, in sensation. In that subtle but unmistakable sense of, this is right, or this isn't mine. You begin to move from that place, not from fear or pressure or expectation, but from resonance, from connection, from trust in something deeper than the surface. That trust becomes a compass. It helps you navigate choices that once felt overwhelming. It helps you notice when you're betraying your own boundaries. It helps you soften when you're tempted to push. And it helps you rest when your old patterns tell you to keep going. The sound becomes a mirror for this internal rhythm. You notice how it holds space for everything, for your thoughts and your silence, for your tension and your release. It doesn't demand that you be anything other than what you are. That kind of acceptance is rare. And when you encounter it, even from a sound, It leaves a mark. It creates a reference point, a felt memory, a place to return to. You realize you don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to become anything new. You simply need to remember who you are when the noise settles, who you are underneath the striving, who you are when you feel safe enough to be honest. That kind of honesty isn't dramatic, it's subtle, lived, consistent. It shows up in the small decisions, in how you speak to yourself, in the way you allow space for your own needs without shame. And slowly, you stop performing. You stop proving. You stop over-explaining. You start trusting your own experience. You start believing that your body's signals are wise, that your emotions are messengers, that your rest is productive, that your intuition matters. And all of this, the stillness, the listening, the returning, it starts to reshape your relationship to time. You stop rushing towards some imagined endpoint. You stop measuring your value by how much you've done. You begin to find meaning in how deeply you were present, in how fully you felt, in how kindly you responded. And that changes everything. Even the hard days feel different, not because they're easy, but because you're not abandoned within them. You're there, you're anchored, you're listening, and that inner presence creates a buffer. It doesn't erase pain, but it holds it with compassion. You realize that even in your restlessness, you are not broken. Even in your anxiety, you are not lost. Even in your uncertainty, you are not without direction. You're human, complex, beautifully unfinished, and always capable of returning. The sound continues, steady, unhurried, unchanging. A reminder that you don't need to rush to meet yourself. There's time, there's space, there's room for your whole experience, just as it is. You exhale a little more deeply. You feel your shoulders drop. You notice that, for this moment, there's nothing you need to fix, nothing to solve, just this presence, just this sound. And in that presence, you remember peace is not a destination, it's a practice, a rhythm, a home you carry within. In the hush that follows a long listening, something subtle shifts, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with a kind of quiet certainty, like a door inside you slowly creaks open, not to somewhere new, but back to a place you've always known. The place beneath the noise, beneath the effort, beneath the roles you play and the masks you wear. It doesn't announce itself, it just feels right. Like slipping into warm light after a stretch of shadow, like recognizing your own reflection for the first time in a long while. There's nothing to chase here, no goal to reach, no mountain to climb. It's simply an invitation to stay, to breathe, to soften, and in that softening there's room for all of you, the messy, the clear, the unsure, the strong, the tender, the tired, the longing. Nothing has to be edited, nothing has to be hidden. And here's the quiet miracle: the more you allow what's here, the more you feel supported by it. You stop resisting the tension and instead let it speak. You stop pushing past discomfort and begin to listen for its root. You stop apologizing for your needs and begin honoring them as sacred. Even the restlessness, yes, even that, starts to become something different. Not a problem to fix, but a signal to decode. A whisper saying, something matters here. Maybe it's a need for change. Maybe it's a call to slow down. Maybe it's grief that hasn't had room to breathe. Whatever it is, it's not wrong. It's not an interruption. It's part of your path. And slowly, your posture toward discomfort begins to shift. You meet it less like an enemy and more like a teacher. You stop bracing. You start allowing. You start responding with curiosity instead of control. That space between the tension and your reaction grows wider. And in that space, something softer takes root. Compassion. Not the kind that looks good on paper, but the lived kind. The messy everyday, I see you and I'm still here kind. The kind you offer yourself when the day goes sideways, when you forget, when you fall back into old habits, when you feel far away from peace. especially then, because this isn't about staying in a perfect state of calm. It's about knowing how to return again and again. It's about remembering that the rhythm is still there, even when you can't hear it, that you can step back into it at any time. Not because you've mastered it, but because it never stopped welcoming you. You carry this rhythm with you now, in the way you move through conversations, in how you pause before reacting, in how you let silence stretch just a little longer, in how you rest, how you listen, how you love, and the sound it's still there. Not needing to be noticed, but always present, like a low hum of steadiness under everything else, like a friend who doesn't need to talk, just sits beside you, reminding you that you're not alone. You begin to trust that even in the noise, there is still quiet. Even in the rush, there is still space. Even in the doubt, there is still something true. That truth isn't something you need to find. It's something you've always known. You just needed a little stillness to remember. Sometimes, the most profound changes don't arrive with thunder. They arrive in the pause between breaths, in the moment you choose to stay instead of escape, in the soft surrender that follows a long-held tension. These shifts are gentle, almost imperceptible, but they carry weight. You begin to notice them not because the world outside changes, but because the way you move through it does. There's less rushing, less grasping, more noticing, more allowing, more returning to that place within that simply says, I'm here, and being here, fully, quietly, honestly, becomes enough. It's not that your responsibilities disappear, or that you stop feeling restless entirely, but you gain a new relationship to that restlessness. You're no longer thrown off course by it. You learn how to listen for its message without letting it drive your choices. You hold it with curiosity. You walk with it, not against it. You breathe with it, not over it. This shift, though subtle, radiates outward. It touches how you begin and end your day. It influences how you listen to others, how you speak to yourself, how you tend to your energy. You may notice yourself pausing more often, between tasks, between thoughts, between reactions. That pause is powerful. It makes room for choice. It's where presence lives, and presence is where everything real begins. With practice, the sound becomes more than background. It becomes a partner. It reminds you that steadiness is not about being rigid. It's about being rooted, about trusting your own inner ground, even when everything around you feels uncertain. And when life does inevitably pull you away, that sound is a thread, a lifeline you can follow back to yourself. You don't need to force that return. It's not about discipline. It's about remembering, about realizing that the moment you notice you've drifted, you're already on your way back. That noticing is the practice. That moment is the invitation. And what a quiet relief it is to live from this place. To know that your worth isn't tied to how calm you are or how focused you stay, but to your willingness to return again and again, patiently, gently, fully, to return not because you failed, but because you're free. Free to choose presence over performance. Free to feel fully. Free to be as you are. This freedom gives rise to something else. Gratitude. Not the kind that's forced or practiced like a routine, but the kind that arises naturally, like light spilling through an open window. Gratitude for the breath, for the moment, for the chance to start again, for the quiet hum of sound that never judged, never rushed, only held space. You realize you don't need to become someone else to feel peace. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. Peace isn't something you chase. It's something you cultivate, moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. It lives here, where your awareness meets your willingness, where your breath meets your body, where your heart softens even just a little. So, you let yourself soften. You let yourself be held by the sound, by the breath, by the quiet rhythm of simply being here. And in that softness, you find your strength, not in tension, not in armor, but in your openness, in your capacity to remain present, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, especially then. Because presence isn't the absence of difficulty, it's the refusal to abandon yourself in the midst of it. And so, after these hours spent journeying inward, letting go, returning to stillness, and simply listening, you may find that the sound never really ends. It lives in you now, quietly echoing, not as something separate, but as something native to your own being. The echoes aren't just in the space around you. They're in the pause you choose to honor, in the softness you give your own breath, in the silence that no longer feels empty, but alive, the restless part of you. It's still there, but now you meet it differently. Not with resistance, but with a deeper understanding. You don't push it away or try to silence it. You greet it, sit beside it, ask what it needs. And sometimes just that gesture is enough. The asking, the listening, the willingness to stay. There's a comfort in knowing that you don't have to chase calm. You don't have to perfect peace. You simply have to remember your way back. And that remembering becomes a rhythm, a natural part of your day, like brushing your teeth or stepping outside for air. Only this rhythm lives deeper. It reminds you who you are beneath the noise, beneath the tasks, beneath the expectations. As you move forward, the sound might surface in unexpected places, in the quiet between sentences, in the hush of early morning light, in the way your shoulders drop when no one is looking, in the choice to rest when the world tells you to produce. These echoes are subtle. They don't demand attention. They simply remind you you're already enough. You're already home. Let yourself return again and again. Not because you've lost your way, but because coming home is a practice, not a destination. And every return is a reaffirmation that your presence matters, that your breath matters, that your peace, however small, however brief, deserves space. You may forget. You may fall back into the tide of urgency, the grip of distraction, the swirl of doing. That's okay. That's part of being human. But now you carry something different. You carry the memory of stillness. You carry the sound that steadies. You carry the truth that there is nothing to earn, only space to allow. You've spent time in this space of sound and reflection not to escape life, but to meet it more fully, to anchor yourself in what's real, to tend gently to what often gets overlooked. And that tending, that gentle presence, becomes a gift you offer, first to yourself and then to the world around you. So let this moment close not with an ending, but with a continuation, a quiet promise you make to yourself to return when you need to listen when it's hard, to soften when you can, to live from the echo of presence, even when the world gets loud, because the sound doesn't leave you, it lives within you, steady, subtle, always waiting for you to remember.